Madam Chair, it's all yours.
Okay, fantastic. Well, let me go ahead and call this meeting of the Oregon Aviation Board into session, our first hybrid session. So we'll kind of take baby steps, and I'll apologize to the greater audience out there if we have any technical difficulties that we're working through on this first particular meeting. So with that, I think you'll see some familiar faces and some new faces for this particular board meeting, as we have a little bit of transition going on. We have Vince, who has been here for 8 wondrous years and has been our vice chair for a majority of those. He's leaving us, as well as Hilda Pereiro, who has been on the board meeting and championing the education section. She's also going to step off the board. And to replace those two, we have the one and only Kenji Shuhara, who came to us as a UAV super specialist and has worked a little bit on a volunteer basis with Oregon Department of Aviation before. And then, of course, Steve Nagy's been here with the port. How long have you been with aviation and the port?
25 years, I think.
Yeah, so
He's still a rookie. He's still a rookie.
Nothing compared to this in 4 years.
absolutely fantastic. 2 individuals that, just, oh, gee whiz, I think we've just become twice the board we were before, just because now smart. So I really appreciate everybody's service, and Hilda, I think we're going to try to get her on still, but she may be having a little bit of technical difficulty. But in the meantime, we do have some parting gifts for Vince, as not only was he vice chair, by the way, but he spent 6 months as chair, as I kind of filled in as director for a little bit when we gapped over Mitch and Betty. So I really appreciate his leadership. And if you don't know, being the leadership position in the port, the fantastic knowledge he brings to the board is, and just the persona and his public, presence is just been fantastic for me. I mean, me personally, I really welcome every time I got a chance to engage. So we want to say thank you very much. And because of your board chair and vice chair duties, we have the coveted.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, we put a little, so you can, have a little bit of gavel action there for you. There we go.
Oh, that's so fantastic. I love that. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
And then Vince just told us he's off to Europe for a long extended vacation. So we hope maybe perhaps the staff got together to get you something to help it, and aesthetic, or to what do they call it when they help clean up, with the alcohol in there. Antiseptic, that's it. So maybe you can make good use of that. Well,
That's terrific.
let me write it, and any parting words that you may have?
Sure, just it's hard for me to believe that it's been 8 years. It's kind of flown by, actually, and I think about when I started and just all the different things that have gone on. I guess the one thing that I just have appreciated so much is this team right here. The staff is just phenomenal. The amount of work that they get done with such, as you know, Martha, limited resources, and but everybody dives in and gets stuff done. It's just a terrific group, and it's really been a privilege to be here and to get to see the different things. I love the fact that we got into the habit of rotating around and going to see the other airports. So we went to Bend and Pacific City and Pendleton and Salem and should go to Eugene and see Catherine's airport, and and how the community is just thirsting to talk to you and wants to know what you're doing and what you're saying. And that to me was just a really great experience to hear from the people out there. And so it's been an honor, and I can't thank you enough for the support and for the staff too, just everything that they've done to make it. It's been great. It's been a highlight of my career. I've been very, very fortunate to do it, but we leave you in very good hands here with the next round of folks.
Well,
So,
thank you very
thank
much.
you very much.
I
I
guess
appreciate
there's a
it.
round of applause there. Okay, I know you're not one to put the spotlight on yourself, so but once again, we just want to say thank you, because it is all about sacrificing your time, this is all volunteer work, and the state absolutely appreciates every minute you give us.
I appreciate it. It's been my honor, and it's really been a fun experience. So thank you.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. All right, so with that, we're on to board business then.
Madam Chair, may I do roll call for the record?
Please do.
All right, Chair Meeker,
Here.
Vice Chair Granado,
Here.
Catherine Stevens,
Here.
Mike Oliver.
Here.
And for the record, Tom Kruger is excused, if you would say so, that he is absent.
Yep.
So he's excused, and then Hilda Pareo is hoping to get on, but if she can't, she will need to be excused as well.
That's it.
And we have one vacancy yet, and Kenji Sugahara's term begins tomorrow. So we're still down two.
Okay, but I understand Steve starts then
July 1st,
July 1st,
yes.
and then we'll stand by for the governor's desired appointment
For
announcement in for the September e-board. Will it be e-board, or will it be just standard coming here to say you're gonna meet with the whole?
I've got that on the agenda for later in the program.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
All right, we will stay tuned then. Thanks. Okay, well, for the board members present, you've had a chance to review the consent agenda, which is basically just consists of the meeting in April from the Oregon Aviation Board meeting minutes. If there's any desire to make any corrections in those minutes, please speak up, or if there's anything you'd like to add or just mention, please speak up. Hearing nothing, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as stands?
So moved.
And first motion by Vince, do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Mike. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as is, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing that, know that the consent agenda has approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, now once Kathy gets ready, we'll now get into the best part of the session, and that's public comment. And for that, Kathy, do we have anybody signed up?
I do not have anybody signed up, Madam Chair, for public comment today. I don't have any emails, and I don't have any written comment that's been provided either. So I've opened it up for people who are on, we don't have any members of the public in the room here, but if there's anybody on Zoom who would like to participate, I would encourage you to either use the raise hand or say so. I see Dave and if you could your full name and if you're representing an organization.
Okay, my name is Dave Inman, and I'm representing the Friends of Pacific City State Airport. Shall I proceed?
Please do, Dave.
Okay, it's nice to talk with you this morning. I've come to update you on the status of the airport and some issues. First, in the last 12 months, the Friends have organized a work party much like those of prior years. We've added a weather station and a camera, both on 24/7. We've moved the bicycle shed to make a neighbor happy. We do regular maintenance of tie-down chains, bicycles, restroom cleaning and supplies. Restroom doors were damaged in a storm, so we've repaired those. We removed debris from the airport's runway. Often that happens in floods. We do airport mowing and we do windsock replacement. We've arranged for the county to place parking barriers at the north end of the runway. Semis were parking there in the flight path. That's not good. And we worked in collaboration with the ODA on 2 grant projects. One was a successful $20K grant from Tillamook County. The other was a failed grant with Connect Oregon. We appreciate the ODA's work on this. It's nice. That brings me to the issues. We need an update on the signage. Kind of been working on that since 2020. We have a drainage system that's failed, and we offer the professional engineer and surveyor in our group to help mitigate costs. We'd rather not see those funds go outside and be wasted if we can do that work. Emergency access to the airport has gotten a little worse. The fence has gone up. Airport owners, airport lots are being crossed to get on the airport, and so it's a continuing problem. we'd like to understand better what's going on with SOAR funds. We've been waiting since 2020 for some of our projects, and now we're being told that it will be 2023 or 24 for these improvements. And so we'd like an explanation of why the funds aren't being committed. And lastly, we would like to be more active participants in the airport's plan. I think we can add something to the plan and use the money most effectively. And we ask that the board helps us see this happen. Thanks for hearing me today.
Thanks, Dave. And I know we had to delay some of the projects at Pacific due to when COVID hit. We just wanted to have reserve funds, but are we going to talk a little bit about, I know we're going to talk about SOAR funds anyway today. Are we going to talk about Pacific City later, or do you want to just hit update now?
We are, yeah.
Dave, you want to hang around, or do you want us to engage with you now? We're going to talk about SOAR funds. This whole last half of the project, our board is about SOAR funds.
Okay, I'll hang around.
Super. And then for engaging in planning, I don't know if we have any public process, outside the master planning process, but continuing to get the access, the gravel road or the gravel parking lot that we need there with access. We'll continue to work on that. And, if you could help, stay with us and help us on planning. Did you have a specific role that you wanted, or just to continue to be reached out and included in discussions? What specifically were you looking for as a role in planning?
Well, first is to make sure that we don't waste funds on the drainage that we don't need to. If we need to, we do. It won't be a waste then. Then the other is that in planning the development of the lots that are purchased and handling the parking problems we've got, we want to have the ramp look a certain way to best use the facility. We want the parking lot to have at least 10 parking spots, and that's consistent with what we see as a fairly busy day at the airport. We now have 4 parking lot spaces that work, 1 that is available that needs chains, and that's all we have for an airport that will, in the last year I've seen days where it's 15 airports there at one time, airplanes at one time. So that's the kind of thing we want to be involved with, so we can effectively use the space and work with known development at the airport where we have houses that are going in with pilots, and they will have additional parking needs.
Okay, I'll turn that over to the staff to continue the engagement, and then we'll pick up the first real push on the grant program. Both core and SOAR will be in the fall, so that'll be a continuation of finish up the core and SOAR grants that we've put out there, and then you're going to hear today, we'll probably restart some of those delayed SOAR programs, and then for the new upcoming years, is that discussion will start heavy in the fall. So we need to make sure that we engage you and make sure you understand that the timeline, and we get you involved early. It's always easier early than late.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, anyone else? I'm looking at my screen.
Okay. Go ahead, and director's update is always exciting.
I think Ted Millar has a question. He's raised his hand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning. For several months, we've requested that the Department of Aviation have one of their board meetings at the Aurora Airport. And I think with the new board members and with the push for the master plan and everything that's going on, I just like to request again that ODA be consider having one of their next board meetings at the Aurora Airport, so that the new members can see what's going on there and truly understand the true facts of what the airport needs are.
You bet, Ted. And we were out there, what, 2008 or 9 or something like that. And I really don't want to get the board out there until we get the public process done. I think we jump in on top of the PAC process. But I think we are slated to go there first part of 2023, right? Because I think probably when we approve the master plan out there, we'll probably head out your way. And in the meantime, I know that Columbia Aviation is always looking for quality speakers, really interested in drones. So anyways, Bruce Bennett has already hit me up. He's waiting. He's like, he's hoping he could lure you with, tantalizing meal out there, chicken or whatever it's gonna be. So he'll probably get a hold of you to see if there's any way to pick your brain. The drone, and then of course, what's happening with PBX. That is always a topic for those guys in there. And if you haven't been, Columbia Aviation is probably the biggest general aviation group that we have in the state, very active. And then they hold their headquarters at a very nice building there in Aurora. It's a good group of guys.
I've flown out of there.
Have you really?
Yeah.
All right, so hopefully maybe we can get you and Bruce Bennett hooked up and see what happens. Thanks, Ted.
Anybody else? I'm not seeing any hand raised, nobody wildly raising hands on my screen. Going. Okay, on to the next agenda item, Madam Chair.
Okay, so now over to the director's update.
All right, so I see we're at 10:30, so I'm gonna make my report very brief because we have quite a few items and we've got a guest speaker here today that I'm looking forward to hearing from. So I want to also echo what Martha said earlier, say thank you to Vince and to Hilda for their service. For our audience that may not know that all of our board members are volunteers that offer up their time and their expertise.
Little
A
louder.
little louder? Okay. So thank you to Vince and to Hilda for their service, and welcome to our newest board members who bring their own specialized areas of expertise that we need on our board. One of the things I like most about our board is the diversity and the different perspectives that each of our board members bring. I think together with different perspectives, we make better decisions when we look at it from a lot of different perspectives. So thank you to all of you. And thank you to Hilda for her service. And then as Kathy will mention later, Hilda steps off the end of this month and we have a vacancy for anyone who is interested in that. Am I talking loud enough?
They're good. Okay, good.
So anyone who is interested in that position, applications close on July 5th. And then appointment will be during the September legislative days. So then we will be back at full speed. So Tony, if you could go to the next one after that. So I want to just tell you a little bit. Oregon's had a good month in terms of federal funding. In May, the FAA announced round one of the airport improvement and infrastructure grants, and of the $698 million that was awarded to 441 airports, a little over $7.5 million was awarded to 11 Oregon airports. And then of that, the two of them were commercial service. Portland International, $827,000 for matching share on a taxiway rehab. North Bend, $2.8 million on a apron reconstruction. And then for the general aviation airports, Astoria, Baker, Bend, Hermiston, Joseph, Lebanon, Lexington, Ontario, and Salem all got grants. And then yesterday, the FAA announced round two, and that was another $518 million in grants, and one additional Oregon airport in Brookings got $59,000 for pavement preservation projects. So we were, Tony and I were at a meeting with the FAA administrator a couple of days ago, and she indicated that their intent is to announce grants once a month for the remaining 3.5 months that are left in this federal fiscal year, and then try to get grants out a little bit earlier in the next federal fiscal year. So we can start seeing some of this money get moving out. Then on the state level, we also had some success in getting funding. So we've talked to you the last couple of meetings about Connect Oregon, which is a Department of Transportation grant program for non-highway modes. And this particular round was limited to 3 modes for aviation, rail, and marine. And Martha was intimately involved in that process from the start. So we had 49 applications with $126 million in ask and $46 million that was available. And of those 49, 21 were awarded Aviation had 10 projects with a total value of 16.3 million. Marine had 4 at 25 million and rail at 7 at 4.8 million. So by percentages, aviation ended up with a little over a third of the total. Marine got a little over half, and then rail got 11%. So the airport projects that were selected, as you see on the screen, Medford, Eugene, Bend, Corvallis, Klamath Falls, North Bend, Crestwell, John Day, Prospect, and LeGrand all got funding. And of significance to me is 8 of the 10 of those were pavement projects. And half of the 10 were pavement preservation of existing infrastructure. And so, and this leveraged almost all of them were AIP matches. So it leveraged federal funding of up to 90%. Good news for Oregon's airports for the last couple of months. And one of those projects happened to be a state-owned airport. And this is the first time, with the exception of, we've got, Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, we got some Connect Oregon money for the tower. But other than that, this is the first time we've gotten Connect Oregon funding for a state-owned airport, and that was Prospect. And Tony, can you go to the next slide, please? And I've been telling you the last few meetings about the challenges we face. We have 4 runways that are at or near end of life. And in Prospect's case, we've told you the stories of the sinkholes that we have at that particular airport, and it was absent. It's not eligible for federal funding, so absent state funding, we were starting to look at the possibility of permanent closure and having the property revert back to the original owners. So we're very pleased that Prospect was able to gain state funding. We have skin in the game. We are contributing about a third of the cost of the project, with Connect Oregon picking up 2/3 of the cost. And we will be under construction this time next year for that. And then in Cape Blanco is one of the other 2 that have runways that are end of life. And in that case, we were able to get legislator directed funding during the short session. And again, we are paying about a third of the cost, and then we got general funding to do the remainder, the third. And again, this time next summer, we will be under construction with these 2. We still have 2 other runways that are at or near end of life, and that's Oak Ridge, and we are seeking general funding. And Kristen, little later on, is going to ask you to approve a policy option package to ask the legislature for general funds to reconstruct Oak Ridge. And then the other runway that is nearing end of life is Aurora. And we have federal funding to start the design on the rehabilitation of the runway, just taking off. We're taking off 3 inches, putting 3 inches back just to rehab the overlay. And we hope to have federal funding to do that possibly as early as the summer of 24, or at least the summer of 25. We'll be able to get, so the 4 runways that were getting near end of life, 3 of them we know we have funding for, and we're searching for the funding on the final one. We'll go to the next one. I think Martha mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, perhaps. Kathy, who is our board administrator, is sadly, and I'm unwilling to let her go, but she has announced that she will be retiring in 3 months. But she has been with state service for 8 or 9.
That'll be almost exactly 9 years.
Almost 9 years now, 5 of which have been with Department of Aviation. As you all know, Kathy brings just a wealth of knowledge to the position. In her other life as a mayor of a city, she knows the process for public meetings and for how we organize. And she is the one that organizes everything that we do with the board, and does it so effortlessly that it just makes it look easy for the rest of us. So reluctantly, and I'm still trying, I've got 3 months to try to convince her to change her mind, that she is retiring in 3 months. And I also wanted to mention that I will be retiring this time next year. So then if we can go on to the next one.
Kathy is also one of the ASAP grant coordinators too. She plays double duty with the organization,
Yes.
wears multiple hats, 2 real full-time jobs. So we will miss her very much. Thank you. And we will be recruiting for a grants coordinator position and also a board administrator.
Then you get to start the wonderful process of recruiting for a aviation director. And as we know from the last go around, that is also highly challenging, and Betty had to be recruited from clean across the country to make that happen, so.
Yes. And that's why, partially why I'm telling you now, because the last time it took about a year
Mhm.
to do it, so.
Not easy to replace.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
But you'll
But
be here
Kathy will
first in
still
August,
be,
right?
I'll be here for it.
she will be here for the August meeting. Nope, that is one through one last meeting. So, then I want to end on just a couple of really fun things. We're blessed in that we have some great air shows and fly-ins, and Tony's going to talk about some fly-ins in a little later, but I wanted to mention 2 of the air shows. Some of you have heard of the International Air Show. They're hosting 2 this year, and they had one last month out of Hillsborough, and I understand it went very, very well. And it was the first time ever that it was an all-female. Flight crews, pilots, controllers, that it was all female for the first time in history anywhere. And I thought that was really impressive. And the theme, of course, was our state motto, she flies with her own wings. And then there's 2 more great shows coming up, both in August. They're back to back. So in McMinnville for August 19th through 21st, and then the air show of the Cascades over in Madras. So we've got some great events to look forward to this summer, and Tony's going to tell you about some fly-ins that are coming up as well a little bit later. So that's my report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Heather to do her planning report.
I don't have a electronic presentation today, so I'll just give a brief
Is
update.
it verbal?
Yes, and then Tony will get into the projects, and he put that on his slide deck too. We are in the middle of getting the grants out for the ASAP program right now. And that's taken quite a bit of work, but we're following up with all of the ones that were approved by the board. And do you know how many grants have we issued?
We've issued 4 or 5. 3 of the original applications for core turned out to be Connect Oregon. So those are being canceled. I'm happy for those airports. They got more money. Yahoo. But we still have more than half that we're still working with the applicants to get their grants executed. And we still have a few left from 21 that we're trying to get through the gate. Part of that had to do with getting either their AIP or to make sure they had their match, given some of the challenges that some of our local agencies have had with their budgets and trying to figure out what they could use ARPA for.
And putting some of their projects on. So right now, we're in the waiting game with the FAA and the AIP grants too. So we're waiting on those grants to be executed so we can add them into our grant package. So that's ongoing.
Do we have any grants that are in jeopardy of not just failing?
No,
They're all on
Not
track,
at
at
the
least to be completed.
yes, absolutely.
That's good to hear. I mean,
Yeah.
budgets have been in flux over the last couple
Yes,
of years.
yes. And we've been working with all of the local municipalities and the small ones too, to make sure that if there's anything that they need, that we can bring it to the board.
Okay.
And there's been nothing yet. So we will keep you all informed as we go. The rulemaking that's been brought to you for the grants program and the tall structures is in its final round of comment. It's with the Secretary of State's office and open for the last 26 days of public comment. And we'll be bringing you at least one of them in August for final approval. Let's see, the Aurora Master Plan, chapters 1 through 3 have been submitted to the FAA. They're under review. And we heard that we likely won't be getting comments back from the FAA until July.
Okay.
And then probably late July at that. everybody's been very busy. It's a lot to go through, and we'll let you all know how that is moving forward too.
Will the next PAC meeting wait until after you?
It
get-
will.
Okay,
We've decided to wait until we have comments back.
oh, so,
Yeah, and then we'll be doing an open house as well.
Okay.
At that time, and we're looking at doing it hybrid, similar to this, to make sure that if we have an opportunity to meet in person and have plans out, that we can do that. But we really wanted to be able to have comments from the FAA to be able, to have a better
You bet.
meeting. So that's the goal. And we'll let the board know how that is moving along. The Planning and Programs Division still has 2 open recruitments, working on interviews for the aviation planner position, and then the AS2, which is fiscal and grants. It's an overall generalist and accounts. And we had 38 applications, so ODOT HR is helping us go through those. But they've been super busy too, and we're probably looking at least a month out is what I'm hearing to get me back
okay.
the final applicants that meet the minimum qualifications for that piece.
So how's your section looking at, as we look forward to opening the next grant cycle in October?
Mhm.
If you had forecast, may staffing be back to 100% by then, or?
Yeah, staffing should be back to 100% by then, but well, no, it won't, because Kathy will be leaving. But I'll be filling in for Kathy, and hopefully not be doing the aviation tall structures portion of Seth's job that I'm
We'll
doing
have
now.
that somebody else.
So
Okay.
yeah, somebody else will be able to help out with that piece. It's lean right now, but we're slugging through it. Seth is actually also working as a temp. So he's actually loving that in his free time. So if I have additional tall structure analysis to have reviewed,
Okay.
he's helping out, and that's been a real saving grace for our agency. John Wilson with operations is assisting on the crane side. There's a lot of development in Hillsborough always. And we work with all of the crane operators, and that's where we get the bulk of our requests for tall tower structures that need to be reviewed very quickly. So John Wilson has been helping out with that too. So while we're lean, everything's still moving and all the balls are in the air and none have been dropped yet. I'm hoping to keep it that way. Let's see. We're still working with Joseph and Malawi County on some issues regarding land development in and around the airport, and helping them out with a few things there. And I think that's all I had that was big that I needed to address the board with.
Okay.
Do you have any questions for me?
Anything? Anything out there, Catherine or Mike, anything on just the planning update? Okay, doesn't look like they have anything either.
Are we? What's it?
So back to pavement maintenance, is that next?
Pavement maintenance, yes. We are working on finalizing construction for 2021 because we had to winter over.
Mhm.
The contractors have been out to 5 airports so far, and we're in the middle of getting all that work done. That was presented the last time, and I'm finalizing bid documents for the upcoming 2022 work. Because there's no FAA funding, we're able to be more agile now with this project, and it moves a lot quicker. It was always quick anyways, but not having the AIP piece in it has allowed us to put it out a little bit later than normal, which is good for the season anyways.
Any issues finding,
Contracting
people delay
is-
the contract,
yes,
delay the
it's-
payment?
It's tough. It's tough for any contracting work out there right now. I'm sure the Port of Portland has the same issues. Specialty contracting is very tough. There are very few contractors. They're all busy on the specialty side, and scheduling is rough for all trades. We're looking at that for our fencing projects.
Okay.
Although I guess it's a good thing that it's been really wet because I'm sure they're busy doing other projects, and hopefully by the time it's drier at Independence, we'll be able to have a full contracting group back up there to finish that up.
Hopefully we're the worst of the, the scarcity of contractors, and that it'll only get better from here into 2023, but. it's a
I'm
lot
not
to work
hearing
through.
that.
Not hearing that?
Sadly, it's going to be a challenge for
Yeah,
at least a
okay.
year. Also, commodities are going up exponentially. The expense that we're seeing in oil, asphalt, anything related to that is busting budgets. It's
It's a tough environment.
it is tough. So we'll let you know how PMP is looking as well. We may need to do some cutbacks on that program too, given the price of everything.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, so as you look at your budgets, how much do you include in, I guess, contingency for cost escalations?
Contingency is an interesting word. The FAA doesn't allow you to have contingencies in your budget. So,
Where are you having it?
well, we're not, because they go over them so much for our FAA projects, and they're just being busted.
Okay.
For PMP, we don't have contingency, but we have put about a 25% increase on what we're seeing to budget that out. That's why we're probably going to be doing less airports, because the money isn't going to go as far as it normally does, but we're not sure how that's going to affect it, right? Because if you have slurry, you can't just slurry part of an airport, right? You can do crack fill differently, so it's different on your quantities. So that's where it's tough. But the increase is everywhere across the board. It's just worse when you have commodities.
Will you have a better picture of how we're gonna end the year for pavement maintenance probably by August, by the
Yes,
fall?
yes, by the fall too, for sure.
Okay,
And projecting into next year, that the August board meeting will be able to paint a better picture. Although maybe more sad, but it will be a clear
well, it is
picture.
what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is,
Yeah.
and what we have to work with.
Okay,
We do have a lot of contracts in for design. We are working on the Celeste design project, but as we're designing that project as well for the rehabilitation too, it's really going to, that's going to be tough to estimate the cost of the final project, which will be 23, right? 23, 24. So it's just, we're just going to have to do our best.
okay. But we'll see what, we'll see what it is when we get back together again in August and give us an update.
Absolutely, for sure.
Madam Chair, to piggyback a little bit, you asked about some of the core grants, and we're having the same issue there. The airports that either haven't executed or who are delayed, they're keeping in contact with the core grant team to let us know how that is progressing, and then we are adapting and amending grant agreements as they need to when they finally do get bids. We can't adjust the amount they're getting, that's set, but they can at least let us know their timeline. And so we are adapting with them and amending their agreements for time to allow them to complete the projects rather than saying, well, that's, it's been too long, we can't do it. So we're trying to work with them on the same issues.
That's
And we
fantastic.
are for scope of work too. So
Correct.
as long as it's still, we have a commitment to give them the funding. So we're still going to give them the funding at that level. So the funding level will still remain the same, but we're trying to be, we're working with all of our rules to make sure that we can fund to the funding level that we have promised them with the scope. So we can make it different adjustments, but it's challenging for all of the airports out there.
But I appreciate you working with them best you can.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
they give them a little bit of leeway and let them use some creativity, use the best they can do to use those dollars. So
Absolutely. And then that's affecting their FAA grants as well. too.
Yep.
The ones that are the tier 3 or the priority 3s, even they are having trouble with contracting and bids for equipment. So they're keeping us updated on delivery dates, and then we adjust from there.
Tier 3 has probably taken it the hardest actually, because it's smaller contractors. It's not bid necessarily the same way for the projects. So Their projects are slipping a lot more in time.
All right, well, said, give them the max creativity they can, and like I said, the best expenditure of those dollars still gets the money out there onto those local airports. So,
Absolutely. And we'll have a full update in the August board meeting on the port grants too.
okay, thank you. So we're gonna talk a little fire district. Is
Oh,
that
yes,
what I'm
and
hearing?
I am so excited I'm so excited to have Jeff Pritchard here with the Scappoose Fire District. And he has a 5-county UAS program that he's chief of, and he's going to give us the presentation. And what I would really like to say is staff would really like, the board would really like to encourage board looking into a subcommittee to further show support of this program.
Okay,
So I would love discussion afterwards about that, if you are all interested.
yeah.
So be great.
All right, Jeff, you've made an impression on the staff here. They've never asked for a subcommittee before, so.
Well, I don't know about the whole staff because I haven't really talked to Heather, but hopefully that'll be the whole staff. I'm gonna sit a little
She was
closer.
like, come over here.
No,
Okay.
we're good.
I'm gonna
Um,
bring up your PowerPoint. I'll do it sharing here.
As we're pulling up the presentation, a little bit about myself. I'm the chief of the Scappoose Fire District. I'm also the chair of the Fire and EMS working group, which is part of this larger organization called the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization. I'll get into the Rdpo here in just a minute. And working with my partner here, we're going to be slamming through some of these slides. I know your time is valuable.
I'm sure it's sharing.
I've just opened up the time, since I didn't have a presentation, I just opened it up a few
Oh,
more
okay.
minutes, so you're good.
Excellent. We will use that time because there is a lot to cover.
We'll get to the share screen and then we will have that up on the main screen.
Wonderful.
Hopefully that one's.
Capital technology.
All right.
All right, we can go to the next slide. So a little bit about myself. In addition to being the fire chief and working with the Rdpo, I spend a majority of my summers working with the land management agencies on big wildland fires. I go out as a division supervisor, which is part of the operations group. And we cover Oregon, Washington, we go as far as Alaska or other states if necessary. And why that's significant is we get exposure to other agencies and how they do things. The Department of the Interior and the U.S. Forest Service probably have the most robust UAS program in the country. And of course, their program was built upon aviation culture. They've been flying fixed wing and rotor wing for eons. And when we were developing our program, we thought, whoa, let's look at this. This makes sense. In addition to that, I am a newly appointed board member to the AUVSI Cascade chapter, and I'm the public safety representative with them. And then I also sit on the National Wildfire Coordination Groups, and this is a mouthful, Interagency Fire UAS Subcommittee. And I get to sit with the Forest Service, the BLM, the Park Service, as they develop and make changes to the program, which is a national program. We get to see how it's going, and then we're also participating with some of the curriculum development, as well as the standards, the operating guides. So this picture here, this is from last summer on one of the fires I was on, and this is kind of what it's like when it's running and gunning. So next slide, please. Okay, so and you can just keep clicking through here. We're good now. So the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization started in 2012, and it is comprised of Clark County, Washington, and then 4 counties in Oregon. And the premise behind this was, hey, we're getting this federal funding from something called UASI, which is the Urban Area Security Initiative funds. We have a ton of working groups. If you go to the next slide, please. And in our area, when you look at the numbers, we cover about 2.3 million people and 4,400 square miles. So it's a big region. Next slide, please. And when we look at just the fire agencies, and you can keep looking through, there's about 30 of them, and then 2 more clicks. When we get to all the RDPO agencies, when we include public works, law enforcement, it's about 70. Go back 1. So the composition of the RDPO is made up in a way in which everybody gets a voice. So we have these things called work groups, and they're defined by different specialties, and we're going to get into that in the next slide. But the work groups provide information to this thing called the program committee. The program committee looks at the region at large and says, hey, this is what we want to work with. This is what we don't want to work with. And then it gets pushed up to a steering committee. You have another group of people that looks at all the projects and things that we're doing. And then it ends up with the policy committee, which is made up of mayors, elected officials, and large agency heads. So it's a pretty interesting organization that has no legal standing other than it's a bunch of agreements amongst these counties saying, hey, we're going to work together. Next slide, please. So the work group, I think it's about 5 or 6 clicks. So these are the different work groups that are participants in this RDPO project. I think there's one more. And we all collaborate on different projects to help our region out and prepare for disasters. Next slide. That picture there was of a mission we flew with the Coast Guard. We've done several missions for them in the local area because they don't have a UAS program. So what is the project about? In 2018, there was nothing when we first conceived this idea. No mutual aid, there was no standards, no federal standards. It was pretty much Part 107, which doesn't really mean anything. When it came to mutual aid, nobody knew what was available in the region or how to get in touch with it. And that poses some other problems that we'll talk about in a couple of slides. So in 2018, we did this pitch. As I described to you, we went through the whole entire process, but we said, hey, what we want to do is we want to create a foundation that we can share with everybody on what you should have for a foundation for policies, for your operations guides, and then we wanted to develop a training program past the Part 107 that the FAA requires. And in doing so, we knew we wanted to include the NIST process, the open lane process, and I'll discuss that later. But also we wanted to have a way to track all our pilots and the aircraft, which is one of those requirements that the FAA has. Next slide, please. So when we did this, we partnered with a local group. They're pretty well known, and they've got a ton of experience in the national airspace. So the Near Space Corporation and the Tillamook UAS test range was the group that we worked with, and it was phenomenal. Just the knowledge that they had, the guidance they provided, and then of course the tools and connections they had helped us to work with the FAA, get some pretty incredible privileges. Next slide, please. So one of the things that's important with our project is we decided we didn't want to reference these machines as drones. And when you look at what's going on around the world, there's a negative connotation to drones. So everywhere in our program, we refer to it as either UAS or UAV. The other reason for this is because this involves the metro area, the city of Portland actually has an ordinance, not enforceable. They have an ordinance that basically says you can't fly an aircraft anywhere within the city limits of Portland. But it's all based on drones and PII violations and people looking into their stuff. So to help the city of Portland when they get the ability to do their projects, we were thinking about how this would be viewed by different population groups. Next slide, please. One click. So we use our aircraft for all sorts of different things. As you can see, this is a fire at a marina. We don't have the ability to get to all different sides of vessels like this. We also need to do the inspection to make sure that it's safe for us to board the vessel. But in addition to that, we're using it for fire investigation, and I'll show you that a little later. So next slide, please. One more click. So this is us using UAS for hazmat. For those that don't know anything about hazardous materials, and yes, this is sped up about 15 times. The hazardous materials technicians, they will put on all their gear, which takes a while. They walk into the hazardous environment, they do an assessment, and then they run out of air. So they have to walk back out, take all their equipment off, decide what they're going to do, put everything back on, and then go in there. So with uncrewed aircraft, we have the ability to go in there, identify what's going on, and relay this information real time, which cuts down on the hazardous materials exposing the environment. Next slide, please. One more click. So obviously flooding, everybody's seen these types of videos before. Same thing with disaster assessments after hurricanes, tornadoes. This is what we're using aircraft for in public safety. This is actually a flood a couple of years ago in Scappoose. Next slide, please. One more click. So what's really hard, I'm gonna have to run up to the screen here, but there is a firefighter right there walking in the woods, and he's trying to find a fire. Unfortunately, he can't see the fire because it's burning in the ground. But when we roll in thermal imaging into the aircraft, we're actually able to see the hot spots, and we're able to guide firefighters into the actual hot spot. And so what you're seeing here is an excerpt of us actually guiding people to the fire. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. This is a picture of something that's pretty unusual that's happening regularly now on wildland fires. I think there's maybe one agency in the state that is doing this in addition to the federal land management agencies. But the hopper that you see underneath the aircraft has these things called Dragon Balls. And the Dragon Balls are what we use for aerial ignition. So in the old days, we would have something like this in a helicopter. Guys would sit on the edge of the helicopter and they launch these things out. And when they hit the ground, they burst into flame. Why would you want to do that? Well, it's pretty simple. Sometimes we need to start fires way deep in the fire environment, and it's dangerous to put people in there. What we found is using uncrewed aircraft, it's actually cheaper and safer, and we don't have to worry about people losing their lives. And there's been, I think, 4 or 5 helicopter crashes with fatalities with people that are doing aerial ignition. So moving to the uncrewed aircraft environment has done a lot for us. Next slide, please. Do one more click. I don't know if the audio is going to work. That's okay. So what you're seeing here is some testing we did with one of our local companies, FLIR. Now it's Teledyne FLIR. What mounted on top of the aircraft is I think it's a 10 gas sensor. And what we were doing is helping them develop a suitable mechanism 'remotely. And that's what we're doing with this aircraft. Next slide, please. 2 clicks. What you're seeing here is a fatal accident that occurred on the 7th of March. And the reason I'm bringing this up is for those that have seen other presentations by the state police or law enforcement partners, we're able to open roads a lot faster now using uncrewed aircraft, because the traditional methods for accident reconstruction consist of using a tripod with a GPS unit, essentially survey grade unit, and the officers have to go hit every single point, which takes time, and then they have to map out and sketch everything, take photographs, and you're looking at 3 to 4 hours sometimes. With the uncrewed aircraft, we're able to fly the mission in about 30 minutes, capture that data, and open the road. So on this particular date, our agency responded to this fatal accident. The local state police aviator unfortunately was not there, so they couldn't fly. And one of the troopers knew, we participate with them, and they said, hey, can you fly? And so we opened the road like 2 hours earlier than it normally would have been. What you're seeing on the left-hand side is the actual pattern of the aircraft when it was flying. And based on the specific patterns, we're able to generate 3D models, which is what we use for the reconstruction. Next slide, please. One click. So what you're seeing here is a 3D image, a 3D model that was built off of 170 images and then blended together using photogrammetry software. This is a structure fire that happened in St. Helens. We used this particular 3D model for the fire investigation and then also after action review. As you can see, we can kind of zoom in almost anywhere. And with some of the aircraft, we have the ability to get accuracy for measurements to within 3 to 5 centimeters. So next slide, please. So our program, what standards did we use? Well, obviously we had to include Part 107, that's an FAA requirement. NFPA, which does all sorts of things other than just fire. They actually have a standard for UAS, and it's 2400. So we adopted that. We adopted NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the National Wildfire Coordination Group, NWCG. We included their standards, the training curriculum that the the Forest Service and the BLM use. There's another wonderful outfit out there called Drone Responders. They're put together by Chief Werner, Charles Werner, and they're kind of a repository for public safety around the country. A really good group. And then we brought in other industry professionals as we were developing our program. Next slide, please. So when it comes to training, we've developed a couple different courses. And I think this is 3 clicks. Yep, you can stop there. One of the things that we did is we decided we're going to give out the visual observer training to everybody, because one of the things that we found is that not everybody in public safety is using visual observers. So we developed this curriculum based on the 3 circles of safety, which is your aircraft, airspace, and of course the operator. When everything comes together perfectly, you get safety, the little green thing. But unfortunately, we've run into a couple snags, and that's what we're hoping with this presentation, partnering with ODA or having ODA as a partner with us. We can get other state agencies to buy into this. We pitched this to the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, and they shot us down. They basically said, we don't want to honor this or even recommend this as the go-to training for visual observers because they don't believe that they should have anything on their books that's not part of a certification process, which is really unfortunate because their mission statement is all about innovating, and developing standards for the public safety personnel, which includes security, law enforcement, and fire. So anyways, we can talk more about this later, but we're really happy with this program. Next slide, please. I think you can, yep, there you go. So we also created a partnership with the Office of Aviation Services, which is a joint effort between the Forest Service and the Department of the Interior. And they have a training portal called IAT, the Interagency Aviation Training. And all the traditional aviators, fixed wing, rotor wing, and uncrewed operators, everybody has to go through their training before they get to take the actual RPIC class and programs. So we asked them if we could participate in this, and they said, sure. So they created an account for Rdpo folks, and our guys are doing the same stuff that the feds are doing. In addition to, if an agency that comes to us that has no experience with UAS, there's a class in there that we can require the supervisor of the UAS program to take, so they know what they can tell their pilots to do and what they can't tell them to do. For example, hey, I've got this fire, you go fly the aircraft. And he's like, we're in 0, Class C airspace. We can't do that. We'll fly anyway. They'll learn that they can't do that. Next slide, please. I think this will be a couple of clicks. So these are some of the documents that come out of the IAT site. Very beneficial, and they've helped us to create a solid foundation of all those, aeronautical decision-making processes that we need to have. Next slide, please. We also developed a SharePoint site for our operators in the Rdpo. And basically what you're seeing here is a list of the different courses that we require as part of our RPIC training platform. Next slide. We also created a repository for all the references and manuals for all the aircraft that we've approved through our COA process with the FAA, in addition to, our training, the actual COAs, for agencies that are flying the DJI aircraft, how to go through the process to be able to unlock your aircraft, because not all public safety users understand and know where to find this stuff. So we decided to do one-stop shopping. Next slide, please. So when we designed our training curriculum, we wanted to start with creating a trust climate with the traditional aviators, because a lot of the stuff we're doing, at least on fires and wildland fires, we are flying with fixed wing and rotor wing. I've bumped into a couple of pilots that just don't like uncrewed aircraft. There's a multitude of reasons for that, but moving on, we have a very solid policy. Our policy is consistent with the federal requirements, especially when it comes to asking for grant funds. We go way into airspace classification, more so than they do in Part 107. And with our COA, we have to, and you'll understand why in a little bit. We talk about NOTAMs, flight controls. Next slide. ADM, or aeronautical decision-making, crew resource management, safety management systems. All of the things you see on there are major components of our program. So much so that before our pilots fly, they have a series of checklists that they have to go through. Next slide, please. So here are three of the checklists. The first one is basically a pre-flight briefing, and it's just a list of all the things that we want our pilots to hit. On the right-hand side, you see the 3 C's of airspace coordination. So we talk about communication, clearance, making sure that they do have the clearance before they fly, and then compliance. The middle one is a form we call the FRAT, and we borrowed this from our federal partners, but FRAT stands for Flight Risk Assessment Tool. It's essentially a GAR model, green, amber, red. GAR was created by the US Coast Guard, but long story short, the pilot, the VO, and whoever the supervisor is have an opportunity to state how they feel about the flight that they're going to be doing. They rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, and there's no influence for any of the people involved with the mission. If somebody says 5, great, you document it. If you're at a 5, well, we need to figure out what to mitigate before we actually put this thing up in the air. And then off on the right, it's your typical flight checklist that you would see for any pilot flying traditionally. But we go way into working with our visual observers to where they actually have a sort of a dance they're doing with each other. So the visual observer will call out, is the aircraft in place and powered on? And then the pilot will reply back positively, aircraft in place, powered on. And we do that all the way through the checklist. It doesn't take very long. It goes really quick. But we do this, again, for safety. We don't want these things falling out of the sky, and we don't want to bend any metal with aircraft that are already up there. Next slide, please.
There.
So this is just a picture of a couple of pilots going through the pre-flight checklist. I had the opportunity to go through the federal training, the A450 S373 this spring. As of the time I went through the class, our fire agency is the only cooperator, so non-state or federal agency that's been allowed to take the training. And then the 2 individuals that you see here are the first 2 Oregon Department of Forestry staff that have been allowed to go through the training. So those are ODF guys. Next slide, please. Again, a lot of the stuff that we've done is partner with other agencies. These are the logos and emblems of drone responders, NIST. And then on the bottom right is the Airborne Public Safety Association. Why it's important to talk about them is they have partnered with NIST and drone responders to create a certification process for this thing called the NIST open lane certification process. So next slide, please, and 2 clicks. So this is the score sheet that we're using to accredit pilots. When you go through Part 107, you don't have to do any contact stuff. So this is a scientifically verified scoring process for maneuverability of the aircraft, and then also for operating the sensors on the aircraft. And if you click the next, this is what people see at the bottom of a 2.5 gallon bucket. And what you're looking at is C's. It doesn't really make much sense, but when I ask my partner here to hit the next slide, yep. So you see this arrow. What the pilots are calling out to the visual observer is which angle the C's are at. So in this case, it's bottom left. Next click. You have right. Next click. You have top left. Next click. You have left. And then the really, really small C is bottom left. And for people that have zoom sensors, it gives you the ability to actually really get way in there. Next slide, please. This is just a picture of the open lane test. I had the opportunity to go through the train the trainer down in Alameda County in California. The state of California has really done a lot to be progressive with UAS. And on that note, Texas, New York, Colorado, and their Center of Excellence, huge investment into UAS, as well as the state of Georgia. So I'm hoping we can get our state a little excited about this and moving forward. But next slide, please. Video would have played. Can we go back real quick? If you hit the play button. It may or may not play. It might not like this video.
Tell it.
That's okay. We'll go to the next slide. I don't want to waste any time. So for the viewers looking into this online, you may or may not know what an aviation sectional is, but this is a snapshot of Portland. And you know, for the public safety folks, they've never seen anything like this. So in our program, we go way into airspace coordination because we want them to know that big fuzzy maroon box out there, yes, it's class G, but only to 700 feet. Not everybody knows that kind of stuff. So next slide, please. So one of the things that we decided to do with our program is we need to go for a COA. And the reason we had to go for a COA, and you can click all these, is looking at that sectional, almost everywhere in the metro area is covered by some sort of controlled airspace. And for those that don't know, you are not allowed to fly in controlled airspace theoretically, unless you have a waiver to do so, for good reason. So we decided that we knew we were going to fly over 400 feet in certain areas. We knew that we needed to fly beyond visual line of sight. And then, of course, there's the controlled airspace. So next slide. So we applied to the FAA and they gave us two waivers that cover 3 of the waivable options. So we have the ability to do tactical beyond visual line of sight. We also have authority to fly in class C, D, and E controlled airspace. And then one that's kind of made a lot of people scratch their heads. Wow, you can go up to 1,200 feet in class G airspace. And the reason we need that is when we're doing search and rescue, when we're doing wildfire missions, we need the ability to get up high for short periods of time. And in order for us to do that, we're doing things like monitoring the Victor radios or Victor frequencies, which you can find on the sectionals. You know, we're doing call outs in the blind, depending on where we are, what the mission set is on the Victor frequencies, so that other aircraft that may be coming to our location, they know where we're at. In addition to that, we're having our pilots and we're training them to do the conversion between AGL and MSL. So, you know, we're looking at ForeFlight. So we have, you know, we can see tracking of, you know, traditional aviators that are flying in and around where we're at. But when we are communicating with the traditional aviators, our guys understand now that, yeah, we're 400 feet above the ground, but that's not what the pilots are talking about and thinking about. So we need to be talking to them from their perspective. Next slide, please. So for folks that want to fly under our COA, granted, you saw that, we have the ability to let people do this. We're not going to give this away to everybody. There is a process, and we are controlling that process. Anybody that wants to fly under the Rdpo and Scappoose Fire COA has to sign an agreement. They have to go through our pre-rec training. They have to go through the basic remote pilot and charge class, which is 35 hours. They have to go through the NIST course. And then they have to agree to do, a certain amount of training every 2 years, and then proficiencies. Next slide, please. Now, where this really hits home for me is in the federal side of things, they have this thing called a SAFECOM. It's a place for the aviators to say, hey, I just had a near miss. There was a mishap or accident, and it's the ability for people to report in a non-threatening way. The names are stripped. Agency names are stripped, but long and short, this is something that happened in Colorado this year in March, where a uncrewed aircraft was up on a fire. Fire's ripping through, it's burning up a bunch of homes. They called in an air tanker, so a single engine air tanker's coming in, and based on the fire traffic area or FTA protocols, aircraft comes in, they call out at 12 miles. Incident commander said, yep, come on in at 6 miles. The 6 mile cone, they call again, and the IC said, whoa, hold on a second. One of our UAS is up in the air. So they brought the aircraft down. IC said, okay, go ahead, come on in. Air tanker came in, did his drop on his left turn exit. 50 feet off his wing was another aircraft, a UAS. Come to find out, there was another fire agency that wasn't, that was a different fire agency, but they were part of the same fire response, had their aircraft up. But because there was no coordination, because they didn't understand a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today, there was a near miss. So we're hoping that with our program and project, again, we can get buy-in from ODA and other state agencies to prevent something like that from happening. Another thing that hits close to home, 2 nights ago, I was called out by law enforcement to do a search mission. There was a law enforcement agency from the state of Washington that came across into Oregon. And as I walked up to talk to the incident commander to do part of our briefing process, the law enforcement pilot was flying by himself at night, no strobes, which is FAA requirement, beyond visual line of sight. And it's like, I'm speechless. So we need to do a better job of getting the word out, but because there hasn't really been a standard or understanding of what to do, it's totally understandable. The fear that I have is that we're gonna have a bunch of agencies out there kind of doing the Wild West thing where, well, we've been doing it this way forever, and getting them to understand there is a rigorous process that needs to be taken when you're flying in the national airspace is going to create a situation, where you have normalization of deviance. And that's something we don't want. Next slide, please. So our aircraft is vetted, and you can, I think, hit it 3 or 4 times. Vetted these aircraft. So there's blue and red aircraft. One more click. Red aircraft are basically aircraft that are made in China or have Chinese parts. They are not allowed to be flown over federal property. A lot of our law enforcement partners and fire agencies do have these aircraft, so we needed to include them as part of our program moving forward. So these are the ones that are vetted for our COA. Next slide, please. And then I think you can hit it two more times. One more time. These are the blue aircraft that do meet the DIU or Defense Innovation Unit requirements for aircraft that can fly on federal property. So these have been added to our COA. One more. Quick. And then we do have one fixed wing that we've allowed to be part of our program. This aircraft, it's a tricopter, but it'll stay aloft for about 90 minutes. My hope down the road is that I'll be able to get funding through some sort of grant project to where we can have an aircraft that'll do an endurance aircraft that'll do 4 to 6 hours. So when we're doing large mapping missions, a couple years ago, Highway 58 down by Oak Ridge, it got destroyed by a windstorm, an ice storm, toppled trees all over the place. It took them like 2 weeks to figure out where everything was. Well, we could have put up an uncrewed aircraft, coordinated with the FAA, created what am I thinking? A TFR, and then, done a mission, and now we have all that data. So we're looking at that. Hopefully we can share this vision with everybody else. Next slide, please. Locally here, 2 clicks. We've also done some interface with aircraft so that it's in our dispatch systems, so people can request it and call for it. Next slide. One more click. And then what you're seeing here, when it comes to PII, one of the program elements that we're using, we're capturing everything. So what you're seeing here on the screen, this spaghetti mess in 3D using like a Google Earth view, is the actual flight path of the aircraft. And we're doing this because we want the public to be able to see what we're doing and know that when they say, hey, you're spying in my backyard, be like, no, actually, the aircraft was pointed the opposite direction. The gimbal angle wasn't anywhere close to what you were thinking about. And then, we get to create other statistical data that's important for us in our programs. Next slide, please. So on our website, we have decided to go 100% transparent, and the arrow points to flight information. And when they click on that, one more click, it'll take you to this page on our website. And these are all our flights going back to 2018. Go ahead and click 2 more times, please. So for the year that we're in, we do everything by month, and then one more click. This is what people will be able to see. And in this report, they can see how many flights we did, how many videos or photos we took, the actual GPS takeoff and landing location, our batteries, what the takeoff battery was and what the level was when we landed. Again, we want the public to know that we're not hiding anything. Now, the only caveat to this is if any of the images that were acquired that are part of investigation, we don't share any of that until we're able to release that, but that's pretty much standard for everything. Now, keep in mind, when we are flying, we still have to follow all the ORS. So as a fire agency, if I get called out by law enforcement, there's a whole slew of ORSs that I have to follow. So on the flight I did for law enforcement the other night, I actually had to file a probable cause affidavit, even though I'm not law enforcement. Because it was being used for law enforcement, we have to follow the same rules. So again, we're trying to be totally transparent and show ODA and the state we're doing things right. Next slide, please. This is a quick little video, one more click. We're not going to watch the whole thing. But what you're seeing here again is what we're able to do in terms of streaming this data out to real time to incident commanders. On the right-hand side, you're seeing a video feed. The red and blue boxes are deconfliction areas for other UAS when they're flying together. Obviously, you have thermal and visual. But we're using these things for mapping, for search and rescue, all sorts of stuff. Next slide, please. One more click. Now, what's interesting about our platform is that we have the ability to allow other people to come in and use or be visible on our system. What you're seeing here is something that occurred in Virginia, out in the Chesapeake. And one of the groups that I'm involved with, we tend to share codes with each other sometimes. And what happened is, what you're seeing here is we can put Esri GIS mapping information and embed it into our platform. And this is all the airspace around Virginia. And so our pilots can turn this on and off. If somebody's sitting at a desk and they want to, see what's going on with the aircraft that are out there, they can click in and see the video real time. It's got like 1 second latency. But anyways, this ship, the Ever Forward, it got grounded in Virginia. It was stuck there for a month. And the Coast Guard asked law enforcement and fire if they could get their UAS up to provide overwatch in the event one of the longshoremen fell into the water. Instead of having to wait and be behind the ball, let's have them out there ready to go. So there's all sorts of stuff that we can do with the aircraft. Again, and monitoring, you're seeing a bread trail crumb from the aircraft. And as the aircraft moves, you can see the video feed move with it. We have the ability to where when the aircraft takes off, it'll automatically send a text message and an email to the people that need to know, and they can watch what's going on right now. Next slide, please. And then you might need to hit on the slide. This is just a video of one of the aircraft we were using on a fire I was on near the Canadian border. Oh, it might not play. But again, fixed wing, this particular aircraft was being operated by a contractor. It's not one of ours. And it was flying at about 7,000 feet, providing real-time data to the incident commander. Of course, all of this was done in a TFR. Next slide, please. It's probably not going to play. It doesn't like my format.
Okay.
So what happens when you make stuff on a Mac.
That explains everything.
Yeah, exactly. So with our program, these are the different things that we created. Of course, very important that we're following standard and traditional aviation practices. Next slide, please. So we've got our 3 circles of safety. We have 2 levels of participation for people with our Rdpo program. So level 1, we're going to give them the policy, the ops manual, and the observer training. Anybody in the state can have that. The level 2, we're not giving that stuff away. If you want to be a part of the COA, if you want the RPIC training, you're going to have to go through the training before you get an actual copy of it. And we want to do that to make sure that we're maintaining accountability and we're able to make sure that people are actually flying the way they should be flying. Next slide, please. So with the future UAS, some of the things that we're hyper aware of is what we call the sneaker people. And in wildland nomenclature, it has a double meaning. Sneaker people are the people that show up on the fire line that really don't know what they're doing, but they're trying to make decisions and call things out. Our job and goal is to educate the sneaker people so that they don't make bad calls, so that they have a better understanding of what we're doing. Anti-Uas legislation, Florida, Wisconsin, and a couple other states are looking at doing things where they're banning all Chinese aircraft or aircraft that have Chinese parts. We feel that's detrimental to our ability to provide low-cost aviation to communities that would never be able to afford this. We're not like King County up in Washington State that has helicopters. Oregon State Police has a couple planes. Portland Police has 1 plane. Hood River County Sheriff sort of has a plane, but for every agency or multiple agencies to be able to get aircraft up and provide that bird's eye view and get the data that we need to do the stuff that we're supposed to for public safety, we can't have this anti-UAS legislation. And that's where the whole blue UAS versus consumer UAS comes in. We definitely want to work with FEMA for typing and ordering for the major disasters. There's no standard for that yet. And then, of course, educating the public on UAS and the benefits of UAS. We actually submitted a funding request through the Senate discretionary funding process to do a first of its kind in Oregon program where we work with the high school and we're going to give them training on UAS and robotics. And we've partnered with PCC. So for the seniors, they'll actually walk away with credit, college credit when they graduate. And that's pretty much it. So I'd love to make myself available for questions. Chairman Meeker, Director Stansberry, the rest of the board and the ODA staff, I really appreciate the opportunity to present. Sorry for talking so fast. It's a lot to cover.
Well, it's a very interesting and growing area, especially inside, you got a national management area, incident management that's happening. And I can't imagine on the fire lines, you've got that number of acreage and that number of folks responding and the amount of coordination that has to go on with that. Looking larger picture, I guess this is great. And we're looking for a conversation on public safety usage of UAS, UAVs in an emergency situation. Is that kind of where we're at here? But stepping back, in the very baseline, what do you want this board to know? What are you asking for?
Great question. Well, first and foremost, I'm not sure if the board knows, but there is a fee that public safety has to pay to register our aircraft with ODA. So with that in mind, it would be wonderful for ODA to take a position and say, this is our expectation if you're going to be flying as public safety providers in the state of Oregon. Whether you point to a curriculum that we, created or standards or checklists, something that says we stand behind this program, or we're developing our own program. This is what we. So I hope I answered.
It did. And then one quick question, I'll open it for on national incident, just overall. Is there any standard? I mean, we've got, since 9/11, you've got a lot of, on the national standards, expectations, response, specific areas that will be at every incident manager at his table for usage of UASs, UAVs in a national incident, whether it be fire, whether it be like you said a couple of hazmats. Is there a standard is there anything to work from on the national level, or is it just an open range, the states do what they want?
So from the public safety, there is NFPA 2400, and then there's the National Wildfire Coordination Group documents. But FEMA has not come out and said, hey, as National Emergency Management Group, this is what our standard is. It's so new. The industry is changing so much that there's really not much out there. You have to look at states like this, New York, and Georgia, which have taken the step of saying this is what our expectation is.
Okay. All right. Other board member, Heather?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just have a quick follow-up. My comment in the beginning about a subcommittee was in hopes that we could look at some sort of position on a safety standard in light of the presentation. So that's where staff was submitting the recommendation.
Got it. Catherine, let me start with you. Any just initial discussions here? It's an interesting, proposition, and I think it's something that we would benefit from just having further discussions on. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first question is, is there going to be a national standard? Because I know this program looks great and comprehensive, but if 15 different agencies are making up their own standard, eventually something needs to come together where there's one standard. So I just would ask if there's anything to be done on the national level. And if not, then maybe that's, really where the initiative needs to take place, is something that's more standardized nationwide.
Okay. And I'll kind of follow up on that. If there's, we talked about really not a lot, anything from FEMA. Have you done anything regionally? Because if you're going to fight a major forest fire down in down south of the state, it's probably going to involve Oregon and California, or if you go north. Any thoughts about we could talk about what can be done at the state level, or are there some partners we should be reaching out to, probably at a regional level, easier than a national level, but
Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization. The
Oh,
five
that's right.
county area is basically behind this program. Our COA, one of the things I forgot to mention, isn't just the boundaries of these 5 counties. Our COA is statewide.
okay.
So we anticipate bringing in other entities from around the state to participate, because yes, we have this privilege, but we don't want people to have to go through everything that we had to go through, because it's a lot of work. Again, the controlling factor is they don't get to fly under the COA unless we allow them to. So that's where I think we've started with the local region, but getting buy-in from the rest of the state, that's not something I can do. That's part of the presentation.
Do you anticipate, let's say everything goes swimmingly and with the Oregon Aviation Board, and we get something in a couple of years, should we be chit-chatting with our Washington Aviation Department and our California Aviation Department at some, firefighting is kind of more regional than it is national. Do you anticipate anything? I'm just throwing out something. I know it's a long way down the future, but
No, I think your question's on point. So again, this is more than just firefighting. We're doing
That's true.
emergency management, the communications work group, you know, that's the 911 guys that need to fly their towers, you know, to make sure the communication equipment is going well. But at some point, yes, we do need to engage the other states. Washington now has a UAS coordinator. Oregon does not have that position, but California does have that position. Colorado has somebody in that position. Now, that's an ODA, you know, funded position. I don't necessarily know if it, but this is where, you know, sharing this topic could elicit conversation between, you know, Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, Oregon Fire Marshals Associate, or sorry, Oregon State Fire Marshal, and ODA. You know, the state coming together to appoint somebody, and then pushing that out, saying, "Hey, we're working together."
Okay.
So I think I okay.
Mike, anything from you?
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, the thing I wanted to know is, you know, from a state level and the Fed level, like the U.S. Forest Service, are they accepting UAVs? Because, you know, the UAVs from a pilot standpoint has always been perceived as the cowboys in the sky, right? So are they accepting that?
I guess I don't understand the concept of the question. When we went through the FAA approval process for the COA, we had 15 different ATOs that had to sign off on our waiver, including the military. So I think on behalf of the FAA, they're saying they're okay with us being in the national airspace based on our program. As far as all the other quote unquote cowboys, I think I can't those agencies and those programs.
And I think probably culture-wise, there's a long history of fixed wing distrusting UASs.
Oh, of course. I mean, you know, I've almost hit one in an airplane before, but how do you guys communicate with the VFR pilots, the guys that are, you know, that are on radar and whatnot?
So I mean, the highest we can go is 1,200 in Class G. If we're flying in that area, we have somebody as high up as we can get, visual observer wise, and we do have the Victor frequencies, you know, so the CTAF or whatever we can find for talking to the traditional aviators in that area. So we have basically the aviation frequencies that we're communicating on, and we'll call on the blind. If we don't see anybody using ForeFlight, you know, if they're not popping up with their ADS-B or something like that, we're still going to call on the blind.
Do you guys have transponders on that, or are you guys using TCAS to look at other traffic and whatnot?
No, the FAA has prohibited ADS-B on all uncrewed aircraft. Maybe in the future for the public safety guys, they'll put or allow us to do ADS-B, which would be awesome because there are times we have to get it pretty quick. But another thing, just to help you understand what our process is, one of the first calls we make when we're flying, irregardless of the classification of airspace, is we call life flight dispatch. I personally have had to see and avoid those medical helicopters at least 4 times now because they're flying well below 400 feet, and they don't care. So what we're doing is we're calling their dispatch center and saying, hey, this is the GPS location. We've got a 1-mile bubble that we're operating in. We'll call you when our mission is done. And we're flying at, you know, 1,700 MSL and below.
Yeah, it's mostly the VFR, you know, Cessna guys that are flying low and not on radar. That's probably not really paying attention though.
Well, thankfully, our program requires a VO. So while the pilot is manipulating the ground control station, somebody else is looking out and listening for one of those theoretical fixed wings to come in so we can see and avoid. And if we can't get in touch with them, we drop down.
Okay.
Kenji.
Presentation. I geeked out on that. I was like, so a couple quick questions for you. Have you coordinated with Charles on this? Because it sounds like a great program and sounds like it's in the land of Mike O'Shea over at the FAA too. Just to get this word out. And I think on the state level, I think it's a great idea to have that coordination. Because as we know, the airspace is going to get even fuller, not only with more drones, but with the BVLOS coming up, there's going to be long distance BVLOS operations as well as AAM as well, advanced air mobility coming into the scene. So I think any coordination or communication that can be sort of mandated or thought about, especially on public aircraft operations, is fantastic. The other piece too is I want to make sure everybody understands different types of operations. Normal recreational, then you have your Part 107, and then you have your public aircraft operations as well. So the level of training is going to differ. What you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the way you want to operate is the public aircraft operations are going to be taken to a higher level. This is going to actually air risk, especially when you're talking about operations over up to 1,200 feet AGL. So I think that's a great idea. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And yes, I have been in communication with Chief Warner. He has a copy of both of our waivers.
Okay. Okay. Good. And is he receptive to potentially taking this as a national model?
I haven't talked to him about that. And again, a lot of our material was kind of stolen from the land management agencies. But I will be presenting this this presentation at the Homeland Security Conference in Cleveland next month.
Yeah, DOI did a fantastic job creating all this, all the documentation. I actually use some of it too. The one quick clarification I want to make was also on the blue SUAS side. That is the sort of regulations involving what can be bought by federal agencies without an approved waiver. There is a waiver process. I just want to make sure for the folks on this call that that clarification. There are some like DOT facilities where they won't allow non-blue SUAS to fly over, but all the other land agencies, they just don't have a problem with that. So
We're actually require a blue aircraft now because we're grounded when it comes to flying this summer on wildfires, which is challenging because a couple of years ago, most of our state was on fire. But because of the blue aircraft requirement, we can't get up there and help. Like we can't protect our state, at least in the areas where there's state protection, federal protection because of the aircraft. And Forest Service will not give us a cooperator agreement until we have that aircraft.
Yep. And there is an effort to move toward more industry standards-based, looking at moving aircraft rather than a country of origin sort of basis as well. And I know there's national organizations working on that.
And we have some time coming up in September of issues that the board, as board members, we think we would like to know a little bit more on. Generally, for those who are new, September, October, sometime in the fall, we get together and go, what
I think we lost him.
Yep, definitely looks like we've lost the live feed from PDX, so we'll just stand by and hopefully they can log back on again.
Okay, it looks like Tony sent a message that they're working on getting the camera back online. Oh, there's a new message that we're going to a lunch break and we're going to be back at 12:30. So everyone take a lunch and then we'll meet back here at 12:30. And hopefully they'll get back online by then.
FAA, like every code flag. And the only way I can do that is if people are using an electronic medium to capture that data.
So that one's.
If they're flying, they need to broadcast the video, they're using drone sense. Again, they're on the Rdpo account. I can pull all that data, which again, I have to provide to the FAA monthly. So,
Okay, so we've got a little September action going on. And while we're killing here, you guys have any,
We're actually back live.
Oh, back
So
live.
I apologize. Yeah, we had a power outage. And we are back live on YouTube and on Zoom. So apologies to everybody watching. We're back up and
do you care if I give a quick recap of what we've been chit-chatting about?
that would be really helpful to folks.
You know, we've talked a little bit about the RDPO and the use of UAVs, UASs, and emergency responses, those kind of things, from a public body. Desire here is probably to come back in September where the board has a strategic session where we talk about things that we may want to delve into for the coming year. I think this would be one of those sessions, and I've asked the staff if they could possibly tee up a little bit more specifically about where the board might fit in and what some actions might be over the upcoming 2023-2024 timeframe that the board should be looking at. To help it out, the staff has asked maybe a couple board members to join and maybe start kicking around a subcommittee. So Kenji and Steve have very graciously jumped up and said they would love to do it as new board members. And I can't think of two better folks to help us out. So Catherine and Mike, if you are around, if you could just say, are you okay with those two kind of helping out on a subcommittee to kind of tee up the discussion in September? That would be great.
Yep,
So
good with that.
Okay, super. I got an okay from Catherine. Mike? Okay, I'll check back with Mike, but for right now, I think we're kind of on a glide slope to a larger discussion in September. And Chief, that was a great presentation. You didn't talk too fast at all. So that was just perfect. And hopefully we'll see you more in, I don't know, in September, but this looks forward to giving us something extra to chew on.
well, just know, I am here and a whole bunch of us are available to help the state out.
Okay, fantastic. And we'll be looking, toward your lead. This is one of those where we don't know exactly where we're going. So if you can help us to be clear and concise and stay on path, I appreciate that.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Hi.
So when you mentioned September and topics that'll be coming up, one tickler that I wanted to put into everybody's head is the advanced air mobility. That's really come to the forefront, especially on the federal side. We have a task group on the Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee that we're looking specifically at that. And I'm wondering what steps have been taking. I know the city of LA has actually put together a white paper on it that we're exploring, that FAA has put in some questions out to industry as well. And of course, out in Pendleton, there's been some experimentation going on with some of the advanced air mobility. So just something to think about for September.
Okay, well, since Kenji's opened that up, we were gonna talk about that towards the end of the meeting. But what I would offer is for all the board members out there and staff and anybody else who happen to be listening, think about it. And if you would, email Betty and the staff. Be very cognizant, though, not to, if we start emailing each other, that's an unofficial public session.
Yes.
So just email the staff direct on things that you might consider as topics that you want to hear about at the September session. That'll determine how big the September session is. And then we'll come back here and we'll take a quick scan of what the staff thinks they can and get to by then. And we'll see what topics we want to tee up for that discussion in September that you want to hear about. I know that there's one discussion that we may want to talk about, electric aircraft. What are we going to do as a state to position ourselves, if anything, for electric aircraft, or is that a pure private industry topic? I do know there's some discussion that the staff has talked about maybe having with that quickly. This would be a great topic. Advanced, the air mobility issue coming in that's right here, right now, and very much on our doorstep would probably be a good topic. So if you have something that you want to talk about that perhaps the board should begin to address in the upcoming year, 2 year, 3 years, please email the staff and we'll get a topic list for it. How about that? And also, do you have a recommendation on a site for probably a day long, followed with a board meeting? You know, right now, we're thinking maybe it seems like to be that we've got a number of folks coming on who live in the valley. We could stay in Salem, or if you've been to a particular place that you think, you know, there's this really incredible hub of information on a topic that we're discussing, and we should go there. Before COVID, we were in a different part of the state every board meeting. And I would like to get back to that at some point. We just got to realize the technical limitations that follow us now that we're required to have a hybrid meeting. So topics and locations, if you have them, please, board members.
So that's gonna be something we're gonna cover.
No, right now, we're gonna be emailing directly and I'll just be working Betty
Yeah.
over the next 30 days to maybe tee some stuff up.
Perfect. So at this point, Madam Chair, if I could suggest that we go ahead and take the lunch break. And again, apologies to people who are watching remotely about the power outage. And we'll charge everything back up. We can put everything on pause for about half an hour.
Okay.
And then resume. It's 12:03 and it'd be a good time to take that break
12:30.
until 12:30. Yeah, right now it's 12:03.
Okay,
Is that all
so
right with you?
we'll be back at 12:30, gang.
All
See you
right.
then.
Press pause.
Jeff, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Fascinating discussion. And I feel for
only
you
with-
on, all righty, guys. A little bit on our finance.
And, okay, somebody's got to turn off their, oh, I do. All right. There we go. That was mine.
Okay, so we got the reverberation gone. So I think we're ready to listen to what Kristen has for us on the finance manager report.
Okay, everyone's favorite part of the board meeting, the finance report. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, there we go. So first, before I started, I wanted to say thank you to Hilda and Vince for your contribution to the board. Vince, it's been great working with you for 8 years, and I've really enjoyed having your fiscal oversight and insight on the board. And then also welcome to the new board members, or soon to be new board members, Kenji and Steve. So I'm going to get started with my finance manager update. Hopefully you can all see my screen now. So today I'm just going to talk to you about the 23-25 budget development overview. And then we're going to have a discussion on our POPs, which are our policy option packages for the 23-25 budget. There'll be a vote on that. And then there's also going to be a vote for us to be able to receive and expend some infrastructure grants. So for the 23-25 budget development, so right now we've already discussed our legislative concepts and we had a vote on that. We've also already discussed with the board our key performance measures, and we decided to not change those for this budget cycle. Then next, our agency developed our CSL budget. So that's our current service level budget. So it's basically just our base budget with our revenues and our expenditures and our staff before we add anything to it. Next, we're developing our POPs. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So those are our policy option packages. So whenever we want to add anything to the budget, we do that through POPs. And then the next step will be, we'll finalize our ARB, which is our agency request budget. And so this will basically be our CSL and our POPs together. And then we will get the governor's office approval and insight and changes into our budget. And then we get our governor's budget, and that gets released at the end of this year. And then at the beginning of next year, the session will start. And that's when our budget goes through the approval process with the legislature. And at the end of that, we get our complete 23-25 LAB, which is our legislatively adopted budget. And then we start executing that budget July of 2023, and that goes through June of 2025. So today we're going to talk about our POPs, and we're going to vote on those. So I have 8 POPs that I'm going to discuss with you today. So first one is an ongoing general fund ask, and it's for $1.5 million in general funds. And so background on this is our agency very rarely receives general funds. So the only time we actually have was just recently, and it was project specific. Most agencies in the state are funded by general funds, and our agency is only funded for federal funds for projects and then other funds for the rest of the agency. And the majority of that is fuel tax. And because fuel tax is an unstable revenue source, it's very hard for us to make any additions to the budget year over year. So what we're proposing to use these funds for the next 2 years, additional legal fees, matching funds for share, or the matching share for OEM and FEMA grants, updates to the airport land use compatibility guide. We also have some much needed updates to our very old aircraft registration software and our leasing software. And then we'd also like to add a new position that's the board secretary and is also an administrative position for the agency. The next POP that we're proposing, 102, is for general aviation entitlement projects. So these are all of the projects that we're proposing that are under $1 million. So we're proposing to add about $5.2 million in federal funds. 10% of that, a little over 500,000 in other funds, and a little over 5.8 is the total funds. This next slide shows you where we came up with those numbers. So these are the projects, the smaller projects that we're proposing for 23-25. So you can see at the very bottom, that's how we came up with that total of that $5.8 million. So how we came up with these projects is ODAV works with the FAA to come up with our CIP for the 5-year project plan. And these projects here that I've include not only our AIP, so our airport improvement project grants, but also our infrastructure grants for the next 2 years. So you can see we've got projects at Bandon, Independence planned for fiscal federal year 23. And then for fiscal federal year 24, we have projects at Bandon, Chiloquin, Condon, Cottage Grove, Joseph, Lebanon, Malino. And then in fiscal federal year 25, we have projects at Bandon, Joseph, and Malino. And so you can see on the right where I put the source of the funds to show whether it's AIP grant funds or the infrastructure grants. And then the match required right here, that's the 10% match, and that comes from our aircraft registration revenue. Now, the next POPs that I'm going to go over with you are all capital construction projects. And so how we budget for those is these are all projects that are over $1 million. So we set a separate limitation for all of these projects, unlike the smaller projects where we set a limitation for all of them. So the first project is the Aurora State Airport Capital Construction, Obstruction Removal, Design and Construction, and Easement Acquisition. So this project is forecasted to be a little over 1.5 million. The source of federal funds is AIP. The matching funds is from aircraft registration revenue. And that one is proposed to start in federal fiscal year 24. The next project is the Aurora State Airport Runway 17-35 Rehab. So this is a 2-phase project. We're proposing to start it in fiscal federal year 24 through fiscal federal year 25. And the source of the federal funds here is the infrastructure grants, and the matching fund is aircraft registration. And the total project costs a little over $2.7 million. The fifth POP is for Chiloquin State Airport, obstruction removal, design and construction. So this is proposed to take place in federal fiscal year 23 with AIP, federal funds, and aircraft registration matching funds. Total project cost a little over 1.3 million. The sixth POP is the Cottage Grove State Airport Capital Construction EA and Apron Rehab. This is a 2-phase project that will take place over fiscal year 23 and 24. And the source of this funding is infrastructure grants, and aircraft registration is the match also on this one. So this project is a little over 1.6 million. Number 7 is the Lebanon State Airport taxiway reconstruction and drainage that will take place over federal fiscal year 24 and 25. This is another infrastructure grant project with aircraft registration match, and it's a little over 5.2 million over the 2 phases. And then the last pop is the Oak Ridge State Airport capital construction runway reconstruction. And so this airport runway is over 60 years old. And so it's the asphalt is severely deteriorated. So for this project, since this airport is not federally funded, it's non-NIPIAS, we will be asking for general funds for this one. So the total project cost is a little under 3 million. And we would like to start this one as soon as we receive the limitation for it, since it's in such desperate need. So those are all of the pops. Before we vote, are there any questions on any of the pops that we're proposing or any discussion?
Just a quick question, Chris, and probably for Tony. The Malino water infrastructure, at some point this time next year, we'll be talking about an infrastructure ask for, what do we plan on doing with that? And for those of you who don't know it, we can't expand it at Malino until we get additional water out there. The FAA shuts down. Right, no, the fire marshal shuts down.
Yeah, so for Malino, we did not get the Connect Oregon funding that we had applied for, and we don't have sufficient funds. I am going to go into that in my summer presentation, but we are going to come back with an additional request at a later time and continue to seek alternative funds to get that project.
Okay, so more to follow on Malino. Okay, fantastic. And then I just look forward to having the legislation discussion and vote on the general funding. You guys need the general funding. You need more than $1.5 million, but we'll start small. But to say you guys are underfunded would be, you are underfunded. It's just, let's leave it at that. So, Catherine, you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a question about the board secretary and additional administrative position and why that's needed at this point. I realize Kathy is a superstar, and but I have concerns about adding another position just under the current situation with really not having stable funding still.
I see your concern, and I know for Kathy's position right now, it's actually not the board secretary position at all. So she's actually taking on that extra duty. We did used to have a position that was administrative and was a board secretary, and that position did get cut. That's also another reason why we're putting that in the general fund ask, because we do have the limited other funds that might not support an increase in our positions, but we were hoping with general funds, we might be able to make our agency whole again. And that is obviously a very needed position in the agency.
If I can ask on that, now we used to have a position filled by Mary, and really where her biggest contribution was not the board work, it was the community outreach work, paid in spades. And I was going to ask, will be exactly what it was before, where it was 75% community outreach, 25% board support. What's the future for this? Going back to the exactly how it was before?
Almost entirely, yes.
Okay. And we can talk more on that, Catherine, if you want. I will say that community outreach position, it was amazing what that did specifically for Pacific City. There was one point where we were at odds with Pacific City, and Mary did just yeoman's work in getting us kind of in sync and all kind of working on the same page. And also yeoman's work with getting out there, just working with all the other players, whether it be AOPA or OPA or those kind of folks. So
she was also instrumental in our publications, the Flight Lines publication, our social media presence, all of those things we eliminated since we eliminated that position. Our community outreach, our educational efforts, all of that went away when we eliminated that position.
Just a point of clarification, if I may. And I sent this to you, Kristen, in an email. For clarity's sake, it's really helpful to refer to this position as board administrator. Secretary is usually the title for a person who is an officer on a board.
Oh,
So
okay.
I've been careful in my communications to refer to the work that I do as a board administrator to make it clear I am staff. I am not a board. This position will need to be very clearly separated as staff. So a lot of the other boards in the state have gone to that distinction. The staff member takes care of the stuff I do is administrator.
That's a good clarification. Thank you.
And then for title wise, I'm assuming we call it board administrator, board, we reference it, we tie it to the board so the legislators know kind of what it's doing. If we put the word community marketing on there, probably less successful with getting that money for that position. Is that, why are we not putting the word actual, community relations? Because that's really what Mary did.
We can call it whatever we want, but the working title or the classification for it is the same as what Mary
Oh,
had,
okay.
correct?
All right.
It's a AS.
I'm not
Administrative
sure,
or-
are we doing an OS or an AS, but at the same point, it's just a technical, it's a technical classification that's going to say neither of those things, basically.
Okay.
How HR would refer to it is what it's going to
Gotcha. So Catherine, I mean, I support it. I understand where you're coming from about, hiring more staff when the funds are tight to begin with. So I understand that picture. I just remember what we had with Mary, and to have that again for me is important. But I'm just one member on this board. If you'd like to talk more about it.
Yeah, it's good to have your perspective. I mean, I'm still a relatively new board member, so I don't know all of the history, and knowing that we've had this position before is good.
Okay. Mike, any questions overall?
Nope.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, just for some perspective as well, I've had the benefit of running all of these meetings until now from Zoom. So there's been no travel, there's been no venue, there's a lot of other work that goes into doing the board administrative duties when you start traveling again. And so the workload for that particular position does increase significantly when you're doing travel and venue arrangements as part of the work. And I've been able to do this on top of being a core grant administrator simultaneously because it's been Zoom. So to Catherine's really, really good question, what is the additional service level that it will be provided? That is a piece that will be significant for the board as you begin to go back to venues as you did before. And as you said, there's a real value to the board and to the communities in having the board be in different locations, but it takes extra work.
That's really good. Thanks for bringing that up. Thanks.
The Aurora projects, is there anything in there that is in conflict with what we're doing right now from the master plan? And just making sure that there's not going to create any attention that's not useful to being able to get done what we need to get done.
It will create attention when we say we're going to rehab the runway.
Yep.
The first question that comes up, are you strengthening it? Are you lengthening it? Neither of those. We're taking 3 inches off, we're putting 3 inches back. It won't change length or strength or width.
Okay.
So that's the first red flag that's probably going to come up later this afternoon for people who are watching this session.
Yep.
Like, you're going to extend the runway. No, this is rehabbing, taking 3 inches off, putting 3 inches back. That's all that project is. The other projects that are in the pops are ones we've been working on, it seems like forever, on obstruction and on trees.
Yep.
So all of these are still going to be in the, as an outcome of the master plan that we're going through right now. We expect we're still going to have to take the trees down no matter what. We're still going to have to replace that overlay. So.
There was also an easement.
Pardon?
There was also an easement. in
Yes,
the
there are
Aurora
easements.
easement for.
Obstruction.
the obstruction
Aviation
trees.
easement for the obstruction.
Okay, so not for.
Not
runway
land, not
extension, or
aviation,
anything like that,
air
just-
easements, yes.
Offsite.
Be careful.
Yep,
I appreciate
Offsite
that.
easements for tree removal.
Yes.
Construction.
okay.
Steve,
Should I ask?
you can ask what, you, as a public member, ask what.
Okay. I'm assuming that's obstruction easements for a current configuration of the runway, not future configuration.
Correct.
Yes.
All
All correct.
The other is, on those paving projects, because we're seeing this on all capital projects. If you're talking about a project that's being delivered even a year or 2 years out from now, what kind of escalation factors are you building into that, knowing that you're going to be budgeting for those now? We're facing oil prices that are substantially going up at 20-30%, something like that. So what kind of factor are you having in there? Typically, we had what, 3-4% per year escalations. We're finding that is grossly inadequate. So, just making sure that,
It's like 6.
okay, just making sure that you feel comfortable with those numbers if you're going to be going to the legislature, because like you said, that's going to be your price, and either you have that and you're doing a smaller project. So just making sure you feel comfortable with those estimates.
Rehabbing a runway makes it harder to do a smaller project.
I know, that's my point.
Right.
So if it's 2.7 million, especially one coming from general fund, or 2.9 or whatever it was, is that really what it's going to be for a year, 2 years, 3 years from now? Do you have a mechanism to address that if it
We've
is?
been working with our engineers on that.
Okay.
Yes.
That's all. Good.
So any other questions or any other clarifications the staff would like to make? Okay, so board members will bear with me. I've got several motions, so prepared to say first motion and second motion. Okay, do I have a first for the State Aviation Board to approve policy option packages as presented for the 2023, excuse me, 20 through 2025 Oregon Department of Aviation budget approval to accept and extend the bipartisan
That's the
infrastructure.
second one.
That's the second one.
So stand by on that
Oh,
one.
you want to do the pops first?
Just the pops first.
Just the pops first.
Separate.
Okay, so do I have a approval on the 2023 through 2025 policy option packages for the legislative budget? Excuse me. Say first motion.
So
First motion by Vince. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Catherine. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Hearing that, motion passes. Okay, now on to the infrastructure. Do I have?
Sorry to interrupt. I'd like to give you a little more background on this vote first before we do it. For the
Okay, Chris.
infrastructure vote. Okay, so for the infrastructure grant board vote, just for a little background. So November 15th of 2021, a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill was signed into law, and that was providing $15 billion for airports projects. So ODAV will be receiving $2 million per year for 5 years per airports as follows. So it's broken down by airport category. So I have here how much we'll be receiving each year for the 10 airports. So it ranges from 110,000 to 763,000. And then these grants will be needing a 10% match. So the matching funds will come from aircraft registration. So this column here shows how much the match will be. So as you can see, it's a little over 2 million from the federal, and then a little over 200,000 for our match. And we took the request to the June e-board just recently to get the limitation increased. So that was passed. So we do have the limitation. And then the next step in the process, of course, is to get the authority by the State Aviation Board, because by statute, in summary, we need to get authority from the board whenever we're receiving or dispersing, expending any federal monies or other monies. And that leads us to our vote.
All right, and this is all good news. All good news. All right, well then, do I have a motion for the State Aviation Board to approve Oregon Department of Receiving and Expending the $2,047,000? Is that correct, Kristen?
Yes.
the federal funds for 1 year of bipartisan infrastructure law grants and extending $227,444 agency funds for the required grant match.
So moved.
Do
So moved.
So moved by Vince, do I have a second?
Yeah, second.
Oh, say nay. Hearing that. Oh, money going out to our airport. So Tony, this is to you. Mike, did you have?
Your Wi-Fi or internet's kind of broken up. I was hearing every other word.
How about now? Test 1, 2, test 1, 2, get you any better?
Yeah, better.
Okay. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So Tony, let me hand it over to you.
All right, well, thank you.
Just make sure you speak
Yeah.
speak to the owl.
Okay, trying to share my screen. Okay, well, good afternoon. I have the pleasure of following up everyone's favorite presentation. So this is my June 9th airports update. Start with the fun stuff first. The fly-ins this year. These are the events that I'm aware of at our state-owned airports. And we have the Joseph, at the Joseph State Airport, we have the Wallowa County fly-in July 8th and 9th. This month we have the Independence State Airport is having the EAA 292 fly-in and STOL event on June 19th. And then we have at the Cottage Grove State Airport on the June 25th, the Oregon Aviation Historical Society's Wings and Wheels event. And also at Cottage Grove, the Aviation Historical Society is having their great Oregon home built fly-in on September 3rd. So I look forward to participating or just visiting and being there for those events. I want to thank our volunteers out at the Cottage Grove State Airport, Nadine Kelly and Sean Kelly, who were very helpful, or they were taking the initiative to put in a gazebo, and they raised funds and they were able to get this constructed at the location where we previously had a tree that needed to come down. It was an obstruction, it was just in bad health, it was a hazard. So for shade for pilots near the pilot lounge building, we have a nice picnic table and gazebo there.
So they paid for that and put that up all on their own.
They did.
Kudos to them.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so this week we have some survey work ongoing at the Aurora State Airport. This is a survey for our surface seal and markings project, which we'll have more information on getting that maintenance work done later this summer. That work is mostly completed. It's been going on at the airfield all week and should be wrapped up by tomorrow. There were no closures and minimal impacts to traffic while they were just working around traffic. For the Aegis survey, later this month or early July, we're anticipating one 12-hour night closure of the runway and taxiways at the Aurora State Airport. A portion of this work has to be done during daylight hours so they can get enough light for photographs and other work that they have to do. But we're focusing the bulk of the 12-hour closure overnight to minimize impacts to aircraft. There's going to be more outreach from me that I'm going to send to my email group and with the dates and other details when I have more information on when that closure is going to happen. As always, do check NOTAMs for the latest information on closures or other impacts to aircraft operations at our airports.
Are we gonna ask, for the FBOs, maybe to put up some signs or, for our local agencies out there to help get word, the Columbia Aviation guys to help pass word? I hate to rely just on email. We're gonna set ourselves up to get, some angry notes from the public if we rely just on email.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, in some of the topics I'm going to talk about here in just a minute, we have spread flyers and other correspondence physically, and I would be happy to do that for these closures as well.
Good.
Okay, for the fence project at the Independence State Airport, the east side fence is complete. And right now, we are planning for the gates to go into operation on July 5th. Right now, the gates are open while we're planning for that, for those to go into operation. The west side, the contractor's waiting for conditions to dry up. It's been a very, very wet spring, and so conditions have not been conducive for construction. So once conditions dry, they will be getting the west side knocked out. We are not expecting any impacts to aircraft operations. There will be personnel equipment operating on the west side of the runway, but again, no impacts to aircraft operations. We expect that work to wrap up probably around the end of July, again, depending on conditions. For obstruction removal, we have had some delays in the survey work that our consultants have been doing to get approval or authorization to gain access to some of the properties that they have to survey, and finding all the property monuments that they need to find. That has proven more difficult, and so that has caused a little bit of a delay. We are at the point of working through the EA rewrite with the FAA. So the draft chapters are being resubmitted to the FAA. We're expecting public comments in August and then findings in September of this year. And so that will keep us on track with our original schedule to have the appraisals in our 22 grant, and then which we cannot begin until the EA is complete. The easement acquisition and obstruction removal will begin. That'll be in a 23 grant as originally planned.
And just a little heads up for our new board members that are coming in. We report KPIs to the state legislature every year. And this will probably be a discussion, this being obstruction removal writ large. This is the one KPI that we are failing across the system of state aviation airports. So we've got to pay some attention to this and get a plan coming out of this over the next 5 years, where we can start getting our hands around obstruction removal.
It remains safety is always our top priority, and it remains our top priority. So because survey work has taken longer than expected, Milano is ongoing. The EA is complete for Milano, and so survey is still ongoing. And there are some trees or obstructions on our property and on some adjacent property where we already have easements that we are planning to get those removed as soon as possible, which is when nesting season ends this fall. And then we would be getting reimbursed at a later date when we get the easement acquisition and obstruction removal grant. So we are prioritizing that to get that down as soon as we can. And then Chiloquin, the EA is also complete, but we are the survey is going to begin later this summer when the survey work is wrapped up at Milano. And then again, easement acquisition and obstruction removal in fiscal year 23. Last meeting, I shared an update about some outreach and education. We're trying to get word out about VPDs, vehicle and pedestrian deviations, specifically at the Aurora State Airport. It's the only one of our airports that has a control tower and a control movement area. And at the time, I believe we had had 6 VPDs in 5 or 6 months, and now we've had 9 in the last 8. So we are continuing to try to reach out to everybody with outreach, to educate them, to ask people to be aware of and not go over movement area boundary line without authorization and approval from the air traffic control tower.
I guess on this one just irritates me. 9, we lead the frickin' nation in vehicle deviations. The nation. Give me a paintbrush. I'll paint a line on that today. Why are we not having markings going on Aurora tomorrow? And why, I understand we got to get the things in place, but fines have got to start. And the minute we get fined, just get word out there, the board is directing the staff, the minute we get authorization to fine, you will fine. There will be no discussion. We lead the frickin' nation. This tiny little airport leads the frickin' nation in vehicle deviation. Unacceptable. So anybody out there who's listening in, understand that what the staff is about to do is being board directed. When do I get lines on that airport?
That is part of our surface seal and markings project, which
Can we
is,
speed it up?
we are we are going as quick as we can on that.
Okay.
So that is something that we're working with contracting right now, and our consultants, that's the survey work that's happening right now,
Okay.
the topograph survey, so that they can get that product out there and get the markings down as soon as we can.
And I am very comfortable, if anybody approaches you and says how unfair you're being, please give them my personal number.
Okay, well, and I agree, safety, again, is our #1 priority, and VPDs are public, our pilots expect a safe operating environment, and they expect conditions at the Aurora State Airport to be as they would at any other airport, and so VPDs, we need to have a controlled movement area. And
Yep.
right,
So
so,
do you have to wait for the markings before you can do the fine?
no,
Yeah,
no.
if I may add, like, for the past 9 months, we've tried the carrot, we've tried to be nice and educate. We're at the point where we need to transition to the stick. And in a few minutes, we're going to ask you to approve temporary rulemaking, followed by permanent rulemaking that allows us to use the stick. And that stick is gonna be a 2x4.
And please tell folks that, you know, it's not you guys being mean.
It's not.
It's the board, particularly me. This infuriates me as a general. Infuriates me, period. You know, aviation is a business of precision. This is ridiculous. And anybody who's at Aurora Airport that gives you the slightest bit of pushback is not an aviator. Period.
Catherine has a hand up.
Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Meeker. So yeah, absolutely. This is really a pretty major safety concern where, you know, the board would have some responsibility around this. So I think definitely directing staff to expedite this process is good. I do have a question. Is everyone at Aurora required to have a badge if they're based at the airport? And is there then a training component for driving on the airfield?
So the answer is no. We do not have a driver's training program, but we are going to be working on that as well. So on my notes here on this slide, we do have 2 gates that are under our ownership and operation, and those 2 vehicle gates, we are planning for the closure of those gates on July 5th. Right now, they are programmed to remain open during business hours and then close at night. And the default is going to be, they're going to be closed. And then access is going to be through just the same keypads that are already in place for any airport tenant or user to gain access onto the airfield. But closing those gates will, it's a component of how we're trying to reach out to everyone coming onto the airfield, to educate them, to not go over the line, as I have here in my slide. This placard on the left is what's been pasted immediately over the keypad. And then when we have the gates closed, that will also allow us to have more control over who's accessing the airfield and implementing a driver's training program.
Tony, can I ask, looking into the future, at a larger airports like what Catherine is at, and kind of what I'm used to is, you know, all entrances are gated, and you have to have authority to enter onto this, you know, to the airfield environment itself. As we make these incremental changes, do you have a feeling for when, as things progress, is there a tripwire to when eventually we do start talking about what's the next ramifications after closing our 2 gates? And then what is it, you know, and after the fining and after the movement, what is the tripwire to the next level of security around an airfield? How big do we have to get before you kind of take on some more of those security measures where, you know, all gates are closed with only, limited access, and where you have to develop driver training programs before you get access to an airport environment? Do you know, in your head, what those triggers would be?
I think if we don't see a decline in VPD occurrences, then I think there are some additional steps that could be taken. Right now, we just have keypads, and so there are ways to have more positive control through things like card readers or other ways to restrict access. And you know, unlike Catherine's Airport, Aurora is a little bit.
It's a little.
It's just a little bit unique, and it does have more extensive or just a lot of through the fence access, and it's for those private property owners, their access agreements require them to maintain control and prevent unauthorized use to their access points. And so through those agreements, there may be some additional ways to exercise some tools to ensure that positive control is being taken for if any VPDs are occurring through those properties.
In those agreements, do we have it clearly spelled out what the tripwires are to losing access altogether for a business? So they know what those tripwires are?
Not quantitatively.
Probably may want to give some thoughts to that, so they're clearly in the know what their tripwires are if we would ever have to, because God, we don't want to ever have to spring something on a business where, you know, we tell them they lose their access, because that's their business.
Right.
So I want to make sure we clearly communicate with them, you know, here's what we need from them.
Right. Yeah, and that's not a place that we want to go.
Oh, no.
It's, you know, we're not in a position right now that we want to be in the first place.
Yeah.
We want to have everyone operating the airport aware of what they can and cannot do and operating safely, so that we can all just keep moving along and working on more important things.
Okay.
Okay, so I've mentioned about closing the gates. So just as a kind of a general reminder, Aurora is our only controlled airport. Authorization and clearance is needed to go onto the controlled movement area. That's the taxiways and runway. Aircraft always do have the right of way, even with clearance. We are closing the gates on July 5th. Rulemaking for rule enforcement and fines, that's what I'm going to be speaking to you next on. And then for the rest of our airports that are uncontrolled, vehicles and pedestrians should still remain off the taxiways and runways, and aircraft, again, always have the right of way. Okay, any questions?
Now, we just got to get this under control before we have a serious accident.
So just not to open up something I don't know. I know a lot about vehicle and pedestrian deviations. I know the layout of that. I don't know what's undergoing in the master plan, but some of the ways to mitigate these are looking at the infrastructure that's in place. Can you, when you get to that point, you can remove certain pieces of infrastructure if there's a extra wide taxiway or extra pieces of pavement, and narrow it down to make sure everybody goes through the same place, so that you don't have wide ramps that immediately access a taxiway or something. And that's the most draconian way to do it. It's removing infrastructure in order to get compliance. But if you have to do it, you have to do it. And to your point, if you have to do it, if you're forced into that in order to get it under control, so be it type of scenario. But yes, that's probably one of the things to look at. If it's possible. Sometimes it's not possible to do that, to remove asphalt or infrastructure in order to do that, just because of access for certain hangars or that. But a lot of times you can rearrange accessibility to the movement area to make it less possible.
Well, I think that's something, you know, as you look towards the future, you know, handle today. But if you would make, you know, the board more aware of, you know, in the future, if this continues to happen, just educate us on what the options will be if we look, you know, a year from now, you know, instead of 9, we're talking 15. At that point, you know, things have to change, and we'll just have to continue down the road of tightening access to the airport and whatever we can do.
The other is we have a similar scenario at Troutdale Airport where we have a large expanse of a ramp that meets a movement area taxiway. We've actually gone to a non-standard marking of actually painting with a stencil in very large letters, "Do not cross this line on the pavement." So, I mean, if you want to visit, we also have all the stenciling
Okay.
materials too. It's a lot more from a maintenance perspective, but it's certainly cut down on the number of that, because not only you have people who are not pilots who do lane access, they can read, but they may not
You're not
understand
crossing.
what the movement area boundary is, but they can certainly read a very large stencil that says, "Don't cross this line."
What do we say for being some very simple and very straightforward?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I would like to take a look at that.
Okay.
So before we get to this one, we do have in the chat a question about Pacific City. Do you want to address that now or do that under your SOAR discussion?
So, yep.
Under SOAR? Okay, so the person who put that in chat, stand by.
Okay, so this is a request to the board to initiate temporary rulemaking, I'm sorry, to approve temporary rulemaking. And then we have a second request to authorize the initiation of the permanent rulemaking process regarding civil penalties and rules governing the safe and orderly use of airports, and specifically on the topic of the DVDs that we just discussed. So rules are needed to ensure a safe and controlled aircraft operations area at the Aurora State Airport. This would provide the Department of Aviation the means to enforce rules against vehicle pedestrian deviations. ORS 836 grants authority for the controlling officials, subject to the Aviation Board approval, to make rules promoting the safe and orderly use of their airports and issue civil penalties for violations of such rules. So we're proposing a civil penalty that may be imposed for vehicle or pedestrian deviations committed at an airport operated by the department that has an air traffic control tower. And the only one that meets that definition for us is the Aurora State Airport. And for each occurrence of a VPD, the department may impose a civil penalty of $2,500 on the person or non-pilot who committed the VPD. This is the summary of proposed revisions to the Oregon Administrative Rule for the temporary rulemaking. And are there any questions on any of this language?
Any questions from Catherine or Mike before we get to vote? Catherine?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, has our attorney reviewed this proposed language?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes. Okay. And then I guess I'm looking at, if you can go back one slide. Where it's talking about, I may impose a civil penalty of $2,500 on the person or non-pilot who committed the VPD. So I wonder about this language, because I understand what you're getting at is if it's an aircraft, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about vehicles, but I can see a pilot who commits a vehicle pedestrian deviation who says, well, I'm a pilot, so this civil penalty doesn't apply to me. Have you talked through that scenario?
I did discuss that with our attorney, and this language was taken, or at least the non-pilot portion of that language was taken from the FAA's definition for VPDs. And because if a pilot that commits a VPD in an aircraft, then it's well, technically it's not a VPD, it's a pilot deviation.
Right.
So it's category and not specific to VPDs.
Okay.
So kind of vehicle, or if you're not in an airplane, you're not a pilot.
If you're not in an aircraft and a pilot, then any occurrence where you're entering the movement area without authorization is a VPD.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, anything?
I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I don't know why we haven't had this, a long time ago.
Yeah, and what happened was, that's a good point, Mike. What happened was we actually went to the legislature a year, 2 years ago, 2 years ago, and got this passed into legislation to let us do it. And then we got bogged down in the process. So we should have sped this up a little bit, but now we're recovering. Stacey.
Yeah, I just see, you don't have, folks driving at PDX on the taxiways and runways or Hillsborough or whatever. I mean, it applies to most tower airports. I mean, most aviation folks know better. But it's those ones that aren't aviation. If there's signs around, then I think it's pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Chairmaker, members of the board. I actually agree with Catherine. I can see exactly what she's talking about.
Okay.
And I think that what you could do today is you could, you can move to adopt this today and direct that or non-pilot just be stricken. That could get taken care of today. I can absolutely see that presenting.
Just strike non-pilot, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Benji.
So, thanks, Chair. The question I had was the civil penalty of $2,500. Is that, and since it's permissive of May, so it seems from the language at least, it's either no penalty or it's $2,500. Did you want the authority to have up to $2,500, or is the intent to have it? Yeah.
The enabling legislation is allowing up to $2,500. I think this may be a typo on our part, is that we have the latitude of going up to $2,500 depending on circumstances. And so that is the intent. And that was the legislative intent, was that you can find up to $2,500. And that's what.
Yeah.
To have that leniency of going between 0 to 2,500, do we need to modify instead of saying a civil penalty up to a civil penalty up to?
Up to.
Our good lawyers?
Yes, Chairmaker, I would advise to.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to make a motion to change. Okay, I need a pen here. Keep me legit. So we're going to make 2 changes. And one is a civil penalty up to $2,500. And we're going to strike the 2 words or non-pilot from the verbiage. Am I correct? Oh, great, board administrator. Okay, fantastic then. Okay, so any additional questions before I go into asking for a motion? Staff, anything you want to keep me on track here with?
So we have the approval for the temporary rulemaking as you just amended.
Okay, so this is just simply the rulemaking request. So do I have a motion for the Aviation Board to approve filing the proposed temporary rules for vehicle pedestrian deviations and civil penalties at state-owned airports with an air traffic control tower? Do I have a first motion?
Excuse me, Chairmaker, just to correct, I believe you said approval for filing. If we can just make sure it's an adoption.
Adoption of the temporary rule.
That's
and then
Okay, wait. Okay, so right now,
Yeah, that was my.
so you want to approve?
Oh, no.
Move to adopt the temporary.
We just want to, okay, we want to move to adopt temporary administrative rule related to civil penalties and rules governing safe and orderly use of airports. We want to do that. So we want to ask that the Aviation Board adopt filing the proposed temporary rules for vehicle.
Adopted.
just adopt.
I gave you the wrong word there.
Or just adopt.
Yes.
Okay, so the proposed
temporary
temporary rules of vehicle pedestrian deviations and civil penalties at state-owned airports with an air traffic control.
As amended.
Well, we have amended that one.
Yeah,
That's the next one.
no, that's
This one.
we just amended the temporary rules. That was what we
Oh,
were
the one that
discussing.
then we're gonna go on further. Okay, as
Yes, ma'am.
amended, copy that. Wow, okay, do I have a first motion?
So moved.
We have a first motion by Vince. Do I have a second motion?
Second.
A second by Catherine. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose. Hearing nothing, let the motion pass. Okay,
Okay, and next we have the request to authorize the initiation of the permanent rulemaking process.
and so for this one, we're gonna, for the Aviation Board to adopt again, the Oregon Department of Aviation to initiate the permanent rulemaking process for vehicle pedestrians, aviations, and state-owned Am I on the right one?
Yes, you are. Okay, going, it just goes on.
It's just reverse. All right, so deviations of civil penalties at state-owned airports with an air traffic control tower. Have a first motion.
So moved.
So moved by Vince. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mike. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Hearing nothing, that's no, the motion has been approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for bearing with me as I work through the language. Okay, for David Sarah and company, I believe now we're going to get to SOAR projects.
Yes. Bear with me while I share my final screen here. Hey, well, in the last board meeting in April, I had brought new requests for cycle 4 and had a brief overview of the SOAR program and with the new members of the board and the board had asked for an overview of the overall SOAR program. So I'm just gonna go over that with you now. The SOAR grant program, it's part of the ASAP program. This is a funding source for projects that the department prepares and as approved or recommended by the ARC and approved by the board. The project shall serve some or all of the purposes described in OAR 738-124-010. Number 4. And so those are for the purpose of the SOAR program. It is to distribute funds to state-owned airports for safety improvements recommended by the board and local community airports and infrastructure projects at public use airports. Then when the department submits our list of eligible projects, are reviewed by the ARC, by the Aviation Review Committee, applying the criteria in OAR 738-124-062, and I have that here. Those are projects that reduce the transportation costs for Oregon businesses or improves access to jobs and sources of labor in Oregon. They result in an economic benefit to Oregon, connects elements of Oregon's aviation system in a way that will measurably improve utilization and efficiency of the system, is ready for the construction or implementation, including whether the project has any unique construction readiness, project implementation challenges, or possible delays, and has a useful life expectancy that offers maximum benefit to Oregon. That after the ARC is reviewed, the board may approve the projects or reject them, and they also may increase or decrease the dollar amounts allocated to those projects. So that's the SOAR process. In past cycles, in cycle 1, these are the projects that we had. They've been completed. And if you have any questions on these, I'm happy to go back. But these are the projects that we had. For cycle 2, we completed all but 2 of the projects, and that's the runway reconstruction project at the Prospect State Airport and the water line improvement project at Milano. And so that's a little over $2.4 million worth of projects or funds that we have carried forward, or an allocation, or I'm sorry, the budget that we've carried forward, the funds were not available.
So when you say carry forward, you just move the bill for these projects to the future.
Correct. We carry forward the project amount, but no funds along with that. And then we do have 3 projects that we had overages on. We completed these projects, and we do need board approval today to get those overages approved so we can close out those project grants. And so those are the Cottage Grove fuel tank replacement and new card reader. That project was was over by about 55,000, and that was due to the tank ended up costing more by the time we had procured that, and then there was some additional costs in decommissioning the existing underground storage tank that was left in place. That was the reason for that. At Bandon, we had abandoned property purchase, and the additional costs here were 91,000, but this is primarily or almost entirely additional logging fees that were done to remove obstructions on that property, and also to take advantage of revenues that can be made by selling the trees that were logged. And so this 91,000 for the budget overage doesn't account for the revenues that were generated by logging those trees. And so I don't have the revenue amount, but my understanding is that it more or less covered the additional logging costs for this project.
So, real quick, you got 91,000 there. Are you asking the board for the full 91?
We are.
So then, when do we see the money come back from the logging fees?
I don't believe that the revenue for the logging fees, I'm not entirely sure that those went back into SOAR. And maybe Kristen, I don't know if Kristen has an answer on that.
Yeah, I do have an answer on that, Tony. So yeah, the revenue did go back into the SOAR funds for this. The revenue, it doesn't change the expenditure amount. So it's showing that it's over because the expenditures are over. But the revenue received, I believe, was close to 93 or 94,000.
Okay.
So it did make up for the expenditures.
Okay, thank you. And then City, this was the obstruction ditch clean out and floodgate repair project. This overage of 42,000 primarily due to some additional scope for this project, which included the 38,000 for the bathroom remodel. Okay, any questions? These are the three overages.
Okay.
Okay, any questions on these projects?
I have a question. There's a line item that's, I don't know what it is. It says miscellaneous improves a $21,000 line item. Do we know what that is? And there's another one about 2 doors up that are the same kind of thing.
Dave, real quick, I'll let that question happen, but generally we're in the board discussion right now. So if we could.
Okay, any way that I can get them in, I'd be happy. I can.
Go ahead and put them in the chat, if you would, please. But that's a good question.
If you could help Kathy just capture this for the public record. If you could throw it in the chat as well, that'd be great, Dave.
Sure.
Chair Maker, if I may, really quick. Tony's new and also new to SOAR. And so we are cleaning up some SOAR projects from the past from prior to him. And we're switching to a different program once we're done with this, and we'll be treating all SOAR projects just like core projects with grants, if you will.
Okay.
And they'll be very specific in this box. You're issued this as the approval goes, just so it can be tracked in the same software, and it's easier. Kathy, Andrea, and myself worked with Tony to kind of unravel some of the overages from the past so that we can close this out properly. And I don't think it was brought to you in the past. The overages were brought to you on these projects. So we're trying to put a bow on this now, and moving forward, it will look a lot different.
Absolutely.
I don't mind, but just if you come back to us later, but we do need to know what we're spending dollars on.
Absolutely. And just looking at this a little closer, so those are for vendors for precision approach engineering. So I couldn't say with certainty right now, but contracting, permitting, engineering services would be what those costs are for.
Okay. Vince?
Well, I guess maybe you're sort of addressing that, but when you look at the title of the project, which is supposed to be obstructions, ditch clean out, and floodgate repair, and
Not
how
bathroom
did we
update.
remodel the bathroom, and who made that decision to add scope.
The state airports manager did.
Um,
The program didn't know. It wasn't handled in the same software that we handle all of the core grants, and it will be in the future because when in cleaning this up, we noticed some discrepancies and we want to make sure it's handled the same way. So it's going to look a lot like a grant, the SOAR projects will, and won't be allowed to like maybe have a spreadsheet or a running tab. It's going to be very strictly maintained in the same program that we maintain for core.
And the issue is, I know you're looking for, you know, in the past, you're looking for someplace to tuck, you know, dollars in at a project. I got it, and this was the project for Pacific City, so they tucked it into here. But just for clarity, you know, we need to have the appropriate titles, we need to have the financial lines and the financial data all match up.
And the approvals, because the
The
approval
approvals.
wasn't given for
Approval.
that. The approval was given for
Yeah.
something completely different. And that's what we found in our own internal audit.
Yep.
So the program is now going to take SOAR under its wing completely and treat it like core.
And
Okay.
that is certainly how I intend to operate.
And Tony is on board with that, and it's going to create a little bit more work for us, but we're happy to do it.
Okay. Catherine, Mike, any questions?
Nope.
Okay, anything?
So,
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, I said no.
Okay, thank you.
okay, so on to cycle 3. Cycle 3, we went into this cycle at the very, just before the onset of the COVID pandemic. And so we got one project completed. That was the acquisition of property at the Pacific City Airport. And then shortly thereafter, we had paused in our June 2020 board meeting, much of the cycle 3 projects. So we had one project completed, and then we carried all others forward. So this was the pause that again occurred on June 4th, 2020. And then it did refer to coming back to the board in November of 2020. Revenues were not recovering, so there was no action taken in the November board meeting, and the pause continued. Okay, so fast forward a year and a half later, and in April of this year, we came to the board with a set of priorities. And this was for the safe and operational runways. So we were prioritizing the Cape Blanco runway and electrical rehabilitation project, funding the gap from the legislative funds so that we could fully fund that project, and then anticipating Connect Oregon funds for the Prospect runway reconstruction project, our match portion for that, and then Connect Oregon match for the Milano and Pacific City projects, which were not awarded, and then our Toledo Apron reconstruction project, which we did discuss in the last meeting. This project, we had a prior approval amount in cycle 3 for the rehabilitation or reconstruction of that apron. That project had since further deteriorated through the pause and through the years until we got to estimate and designing that project, and then also the scope of that project had increased. And so we came to the board with some additional ask for the funds to construct that project this summer. And so those were our requests. A little over $1.2 million for Cape Blanco, $307,000 for Toledo for the apron reconstruction, and those were approved. The board postponed decision on the Pacific City Access Road and Apron Rehabilitation Project because Connect Oregon, the fate of that project was still unknown at that time. That project did not get awarded funds through Connect Oregon, and so at this time we do not have a new request for the unfunded Connect Oregon projects for Pacific City and Milano. So our total amount approved for for cycle 4 for SOAR was $1.5 million. Here's the current status with the carry forward funds in in SOAR, and then our projected revenues for the next 2 years is $1.5 million. So our forecasted total revenue is a little over $3.5 million. And in this slide, I've included the Pacific City and the Milano projects, and which put us over that $3.5 million. So we do not have sufficient funds to fund both of those projects. We want to, those projects will both remain a high priority for us. They're very important, but we also have carry forward projects from cycles 2 and 3 that we also would like to keep moving forward. And so what we are planning to do is to come back in cycle 5 with an additional ask so we could get those projects complete and also continue to seek additional funds. So this is where we're at. The same forecasted revenue of a little over $3.5 million. And the total project budget requirement is just over $2.5 million. So we would have just over $1 million remaining. I also want to point out this includes today's request for $200,000 for additional airport workers amount and contingency.
And I had asked before, the airport workers they're the ODA folks out there doing grounds maintenance and the like. Okay, so first off, I guess we need to go back and revisit then what we started with the core cycle 2.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to cover the overages for SOAR cycle 2. Any questions before we go back and request a motion on letting them covering the overages for cycle 2? Okay, we're gonna clean up some of the software going forward.
I guess you can't really say no, can we? I mean, it's sort of done.
It's already started, yeah.
I mean, the projects are done.
It's done and the finances are accurate to Tony's reporting. In our internal audit, this is what we found. We felt it prudent to come back to the board to make sure that you were aware and approved it so that we can finally close that out and then start fresh with new processes, and also the way the grants will be issued basically will be an internal grant, project specific.
It's as good as we're gonna get.
Okay.
Okay, so do I have a motion for the aviation board to approve the cycle 2 project overage for the grant closeout cycle? First motion by Vince, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Catherine. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Aye. Any nays? Hearing that, motion passes. Okay, now we need to talk about resuming the ponds projects that we did when we felt we may be running short because of COVID way back in 2020. I think we're ready to resume those projects now, from what I hear Tony talking to me about. So with that, do I have a motion by the aviation board to approve resuming the PAWS SOAR projects contingent upon available funds?
So moved.
First by Vince, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Catherine. Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing that, motion passes. And then finally, we have a third motion referencing the $200,000 for cycle 4, reference the $100,000 for ODA airport workers, as well as the contingency for small projects. Do I have a motion for the aviation board to approve for $200,000 in cycle 4 for $100,000 for the airport worker, $100,000 admin for the airport workers and $100,000 for small project contingencies?
So moved.
First motion by Vince. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mike. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing that, motion passes. Okay, fantastic. It's time for board updates. I know we've talked a lot just about, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to, just for everybody's edification, in our update in August, when we have the core update, I'll be giving a SOAR update on what those internal grants look like and how they'll be treated with the same type of milestone requests from the project manager, which is Tony, and how we'll be funding those internally back and forth so that you guys can see that they'll be treated just like a core grant, but internal.
Okay, fantastic. And if you could give us just a little bit of an update then too about how coordination is going with Pacific City, that would be great. All right. So for board updates, I know we've chit chatted a lot informally. Anybody have anything out there for the board? You have a second to think about it. If you could email the staff any topics you would like to address in the September strategic session. September, October strategic session. And also, and if you have any desire to have us go out and specific locations for both, I say August, we're going to have a Salem. Is that just for ease? And if you would like, if you want to go someplace different than Salem for the strategic meeting, you know, that would probably be an overnighter followed into a board meeting the next day. Maybe have a chance to go out and have dinner with maybe some folks in the local area. We'll play with it a little bit, but if you've got a location in mind, please email that as well to the staff along with your topics. Kathy awaits you excitedly. And then speaking of which, please get word out there that we do have a vacant position coming up with Hilda stepping off the board. We've had some great candidates coming forward. And we'll send all names forward to the governor. She'll make her decision coming up towards the end of July. And then if there's anything that you want the board or the staff to reattack, do we have any outstanding items that we need to close with you all, just for housekeeping wise?
I don't have anything on my list. I tried to put that on here just to say as a memory ping, and I don't have anything at this point.
Okay.
So I'm keeping track of what you're asking for updates. And then the usual ones in the fall, I believe, Kristen, you're going to be doing the annual KPMs, the key performance measures in August. Is that correct? Kristen, you're muted.
I think we may have.
Yes, I will be.
Okay. That's for July, and I'm trying to see if there's other things that are on for the July meeting in particular, but that one, and also we'll be asking for not only a core, August. I was looking at July on here about when the recommendations are due. So in August, we'll be doing that, and we'll also be asking for authorization to open the next core cycle.
We will, yes.
So that'll be very exciting to see that revenues, and I'm doing my best to help with the aviation fuel. I fly as often as I can. I've got grandkids. So where those revenues are looking great, well, it's going to be really exciting to be able to bring that to the board with the opportunity for more of our airports, especially the ones that are non-NIPIAs, to be able to get funding.
And then at some point, we have to figure out, a meeting agenda or locations for 2023. Because if we're going to start traveling again, we need to coordinate with the communities out there so they know we're coming.
We do have requests, and so we can bring the requests that staff has gotten
to the board. All right, so
and let you guys make some decisions.
So you got quite a few. We're backlogged, aren't we?
We are.
Okay. Yeah. All righty. So we'll stand by to see what you all recommend.
Okay.
Well, fantastic. We look forward to it, and it'll be interesting with this hybrid, because I think getting out into some of those areas that don't have the best internet connectivity, I'm not for sure if we're going to be able to go there anymore with the governor's requirement to be hybrid.
Well, we're going to do our best. We can, Verizon and our mobile services can get us pretty good reception with our jetpacks, so we should be able to figure out something.
I just know I live in Sisters, and you would not be able to hold a hybrid meeting at my house.
So we would have to do it in town.
Yeah, we could do that. Awesome. Okay. Let me open it up to any board members out there. Anything new? Anything you want to pass along? Ted, are you waving your hand?
Yes.
A question in the chat is on the screen, Madam Chair, and it's regarding the VDPs that were discussed earlier.
What particular question?
It says, could we request the ODA staff meet with the Aurora airport user groups and the control tower operations in a cooperative way to work out implementation details regarding BDPs and gate closures? I think Tony has a comment.
I understand. We've been working with you. It is now time for the board to take action. We are going to direct some direct actions. And I'm authorizing Tony, and the board is authorizing Tony to take steps to move forward. We're moving forward, and I know you all want to keep the gates open. The gates are closing. That decision, we're past that, and we're going forward. We just got to do it. And Tony will keep communication going, but we got to move forward.
I just want to add that I will continue to work with those groups and airport users and stakeholders out Aurora to try to work through those issues.
And getting those signs and getting the signs up to make it as easy for an individual to understand where they should be and where they shouldn't be. If we any way to accelerate that would be great.
Could I just make a small comment? Safety is the biggest concern for all of the operators at the airport, and I don't have any problem personally with closing the gates. We've been trying to figure out ways to stop any further VDPs. All we're asking for is a cooperative meeting with all of the users and the control tower and Tony and the ODA VA staff, because when you analyze the VDPs, it makes it sound like everything is completely out of control. But for instance, in the last 3 VDPs, they were done by fuel trucks, by train that are on the airport. The one occurred, for instance, at 7:03 in the morning, right after the control tower opened. They'd already been operating on the taxiway, which they're allowed to do, and they just went around the corner of an airplane, checked for airplanes. In all these cases, there were never an airplane involved. There was never an airplane on the taxiway. So we want to work with you. But it's kind of like the analogy of being fined for 26 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. So what we're asking for is, could we work together with the control tower and the ODAV staff to maybe even mitigate some of the things that allow that to even happen? Because we want the same thing you do. We have our gates closed at the South End Airport, and they've been closed for 4 years.
Yeah, Ted, I'm gonna say, if you can help us out, that'd be great. I just want to make sure that, I know there's some folks that are threatening legal action against ODA for closing a gate. We're done talking about it. I just want to make sure that folks understand that it's not ODA being the big bad person here. It's the big bad fat. It's the board. So if you could just send folks to go yell at us, we'd appreciate it, but we have to act. And but if you can help continue to, to tell, we will keep talking with y'all, and any good ideas that you have would be much appreciated, especially when we get to signage and where we can put, control movements, whether it's, painted boundaries on a taxiway or elsewhere, that would be great. But we're more than willing to help keep you in the conversation, you bet. But we're going to continue to move forward.
Well, we want to work with you, and we want the same thing you want. We're not objecting to it. We just think that if we all work together in a cooperative way and could at least sit down and meet face to face and work out some of the issues that will eliminate those, we want the same thing you do, but we're not getting that kind of cooperation.
You bet.
May I rebut?
What's that?
May I offer a rebuttal?
It's just, we're going to go forward with what we got here. The gate's going to close, and you all are going to get marks on the runway and then pavement as soon as possible, and keep everybody informed. And then we're going to start finding. That's what's going to happen. But on the flip side, whatever we can do to have the Aurora users group help us get information out, and if there's some language that they can propose, some signage they can propose, something that they can help educate folks who may not be as smart as, the average the aviator that's utilizing that as a business. Maybe they can help us out.
All right, I feel strongly about this. I would like to offer a response. So opened the tower in 2016. There were 23 VPDs reported that year. The following year, in 2017, there was 11. In 2018, there was 5. In 2019, there was 1. In 2020, there was 0. That was because of the education effort that we put in towards educating in conjunction with the tenants and the users of the field. We thought we had this problem solved through education. Then for some reason in late 21 and starting for the first 6 months of 22, we have seen 9 vehicle pedestrian deviations. We have worked for 9 months with our tenants and user groups to try to resolve these in a cooperative manner. And the implication that we are not working with our tenants and users, and the staff is not on overboard trying to educate and do this through an education effort first, through signage on gates, through markings, through education programs. We've offered to develop a driver training program. We are closing the 2 lanes that we can control. And so the suggestion that we are over-reporting or overreacting to deviations, I think is absolutely inaccurate. The most recent deviation occurred when a food delivery driver came through one of the gates that we want to close, that's currently closed at night. We want to close it during the day. Vehicle delivery driver drove through, got lost, went out onto the taxi, and went up to the destination. That could have been prevented by having that gate closed. So I take exception to people saying we're not working cooperatively with the tenants and user groups. My staff has bent over backwards trying to work together with these groups, and we're met with excuses and obstructions and finger pointing, saying your tower controller is being overly aggressive in reporting these things. I absolutely reject that. I think the staff has gone out of their way to try to address these in an administrative way, and we're not being successful with it. So the next step for us is to get their attention a little bit more through a punitive one. I do not want any one of our airports to lead the country in vehicle pedestrian deviations. That's not a distinction that we are in any way proud of. And so this really frustrates me.
And if there's one good thing here, it's that, it's not a gray area on when it's a
No.
deviation. You cross a line, it's a deviation.
Yeah.
You cross it by an inch, it's a deviation.
You walk
It
your
really
dog,
is.
yeah.
It's very easy. There's no gray area.
No.
We're not picking on anybody, but aviation is a science of precision.
Yes.
And not to have the precision on that airport is embarrassing.
And they
So
can see-
if you're over the line, you're over the line. That's the nature of a deviation. You take a speeding ticket, with the cop comes over, he says, you're over the speed limit. You don't go, well, I was just over a little bit. You were over. So that's the tactic the board is directing the staff to take. It's a very clear-cut decision on when there's a deviation and when there's not. It's not up to the tower's judgment call. It's a yes or no. Were you over the line? Yes or no. We just need to get on with enforcement and work to make sure that the signage is the very best that we can out there, so that a layman or anybody else coming on the airport can understand where that line is. And understand that when you come onto an airport, you accept a level of precision that is more than there is when you're driving down the street of Wilsonville. You're on an airport. There is a requirement to step forward on that airport. It's an acceptance you must make to join the aviation community and understand the precision related to being on that airport. In that story. So let's get over the conversation here. Let's get over whatever animosity I'm feeling. Let's get the education out there to the airport and let's get on with it. Enforce the rules, make a safe environment, fly right. That's what we do at our airports.
Well, Martha, we don't object to that in any way. I agree with what you're saying, but I think there's some things that we can help mitigate the chance of anybody even getting close to that object-free area by implementing the internal circulation road we've been talking about that was on the master plan since 2012. There's a lot of other little things that we can all work together on, but we're not getting that kind of cooperation. for the chance to even talk about.
Okay, well, like I said, we'll keep the conversation open, but do help us to get the word out that, you know, we got to start maintaining the standards, and if you could help, and if there's any ideas on signage that we need to be aware of, that we need to maybe put, spend a little more money to put some signs on a building or to paint a line on our pavement, we'll be more than happy to do it, because we just need to get this to be a safe environment. Okay. So coming in to get all the notes for coming up for August.
I do. So the main things for August that I have, for those who are watching and those here, you should have on your calendars. If you don't, I'll be forwarding that. The next board meeting is scheduled for August 4th, 2022. Location will be Salem at the Oregon Department of Aviation, unless otherwise, if there's a change from that, it will of course be posted on our website and in our meeting postings. And we will of course offer hybrid as well for people who want to sit in the comfort of their offices and homes. What I have on the agenda thus far, aside from the updates from all of our departments, will be opening the core cycle and also discussing further on the board planning sessions, the coordination with Pacific City, updates on core and SOAR, update on finance, I think, and then the KPMs, the key performance measures, that's going to be coming up to you in August. And I will be sending out a draft to the board members for your input on anything additional that you'd like to see on that agenda. And it'll be up to Betty then to assign tasks to our staff members.
An Aurora master plan, we should have an update there.
Okay, let me add that too. Okay.
We'll have something back from the FAA on that.
I hope so, yes.
Okay. Yes. All right.
Betty's chit-chat, we may have another thing.
I just need to tell them what I haven't said. Okay, I have an executive session to discuss current litigation.
Okay, making note of that now. So an executive session will be scheduled. Do you want that prior to or after?
Prior.
Prior. So that'll be probably at 9 o'clock, and then the regular board meeting will convene at our usual time at 10 a.m. All right, guys.
Will that work for you?
Can we go from 10 to 3? Just because it's, I got to do horses in the morning before I come over.
Oh, sure.
So
So
put
we
it out
can do
there.
the executive session afterwards.
Okay.
There's no action for the board. This is a briefing for the board. There's no action required. We can do the executive afterwards if you prefer.
Your choice, either way, we're going to 3. I made red,
Yeah.
It's up to you how you want to have it. So the session will be
Okay.
10 to 3, however you want to structure it.
Okay.
Have at it.
Okay. And so the hours of the meetings will be 10 to 3, and then we will send that out to everybody, but mark your calendars for that.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay, super. Any reattacks for the board? Anybody out there, any last issues or something we need to address coming into the August board meeting? Okay, with that, then let me close this session of the Oregon Department of Aviation. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.
See you guys.